Hello, everybody, and we're back at it. We're back into the room of Bolin, and this time we're talking with Proverb Guy and Christian and Dustin and Captain Stump and all the other great theists about giants to start off with, and then sort of getting into what makes why I'm dubious about conspiracy claims, and then sort of we get onto evolution, which is interesting. So this one's a real kind of science and conspiracy one, starting with sort of why I don't believe the Smithsonian is destroying samples to sort of how we implement science and things. And I've got a few of these from Proverbs Guy's rooms. I do apologize that I haven't gotten them out in a huge amount. I wanted to spread them out while I sort of bombed his room kind of thing. I don't want to make it all about one room all in a row. I do have to get some other places that I'm going to drop into. Hopefully, I'll have some more debates coming up. And I'm really looking forward to all the other stuff. But this one was interesting because it sort of was a tenet of faith that the Smithsonian had destroyed all these samples. I'm very familiar with this story. It was one that has been relayed to me before, and sort of when you start to fact check it, it's that the Smithsonian never said they destroyed any samples. It appears to originate from a spoof magazine like The Onion or something. I think it was called Daily World Report or something, and they sort of have these joke articles. I've been into this one before. And it's interesting that this appears to, even though all of the evidence suggests that it was made up by this, source as sort of hey, the Smithsonian the other day admitted they destroyed giant bones, that the young Earth creationists still adhere to no, the Smithsonian definitely destroyed these bones, even though it lacks any credibility. And you would expect that if you say, hey, this appears to be the origin of the story, you could find your source. Like if my source is saying, hey, this is a joke, article kind of thing, you would expect that the person saying it's true to present their source in response to say, hey, no, actually, this is where it came from. This is a prior origin of the story. So that's something I haven't got, which I'm not particularly sort of holding their feet to the fire for it. It's just without that sort of backup of, hey, this is where I got this information from, and it is reliable information, there's no reason to believe them. The idea that sort of Smithsonian would destroy things to sort of keep a evolution narrative going is kind of, to the scientifically minded, is kind of ridiculous. I think if there was sort of bones of incredibly large people found, we would certainly want to know about it. And I think that a discovery like that, people would latch hold of, like Piltdown Man and things like that. People latched hold of it going, that's amazing. And sort of, it took a while to disprove. So a lot of questions came up from the creationists in this one. And I hope I did a good job to address all of them about how these ideas can persist in memory as to ideas that don't persist in memory. That when something appears to be reputable, it'll last a lot longer and it'll be harder to take down than something that's sort of just an obvious hoax or obvious joke. And a lot of the ideas that I'm running into from the creationists about things in evolution are kind of you feel like from doing these debates and stuff that everyone's got to understand evolution by now, but they don't, and I don't know whether it's sort of not paying attention to what the people on the evolution side say, or whether it is not just rejecting what they say. I'm not sure what it is, but I would like to at one point run across a young Earth creationist that has a deep understanding of evolution and just rejects it rather than doesn't actually understand the theory of evolution at all, and has instead a sort of Hovind-esque straw man of it is kind of yeah, it's kind of a bit unsettling. But Because I mean, I guess I would hope I don't strawman their position. I think the creationist position I've got down pretty well. Hopefully, that I understand what they're saying and I don't misrepresent it, but there's no evidence for it. But anyway, this is delving back into the old bowling alley for another for giants and giants and massive bones and massive gigantic fossils. Oh my! So once again, let's get ready to rumble.
You went to
I
second,
have been
third, fourth already.
summoned.
Is it early there,
Morning.
bud? It's
Yeah, it's
8:30
early.
a.m., right?
P-Town got hold of me on Discord and is like, "Did want me to join the room like right now?" And I'm like, "Okay, I guess, sure."
Well, he's right. If you look at the screen real quick, we even made you a banner. There you go.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Sorry. I've
That's your
got my
back call.
coffee. I'll wake up. I got my coffee. So you're talking about T-Rex and feathers? Yeah.
No, that's just the thumbnail. It's clickbait to get you guys in here.
Okay.
I do have to make a correction, though. I said earlier that you were my second favorite Australian, but I did completely overlook Steve Irwin, so you're my third favorite Australian.
Well, I could be the second favorite living Australian because Steve Irwin kind of died, unfortunately, which was really sad. But yeah.
Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. My boy Irwin's a legend.
Fair enough. I'm glad his family's doing well though. Like they're Australia Zoo's doing well. They're doing well, which is nice. It's just a bit of a tragedy. That's all.
I'm excited to see P-Town, Adam, and Mark Reid in the same stream.
Oh.
That's the potential for a good conversation.
Well, P-Town, I'm a fan of P-Town. P-Town's I think he's a good guy. So a lot of people have really negative opinions of P-Town, but I don't. I like P-Town. I've never said anything disparaging about P-Town.
From where in the
people that don't like me?
From where in the atheist community do you two know each other?
I interviewed P-Town like really early on in my channel actually. Did a couple of interviews.
I think you jumpstart that.
Where did I run into you? Yeah,
it's almost been a year.
Praises?
We're
Praises,
coming up
maybe?
on Amy's, I think.
Oh,
I started
yeah, it would've been
started talking
Amy's.
to atheists online
Yeah.
about 10 months ago. And then I reached out to you first.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, do you believe there's any scientific evidence for what we would consider giants, people over, say, 8 feet tall in the ancient world?
No, none whatsoever.
What about the many claims, though, of remains of giants being collected for the museum here in the United States and then the bones never appearing?
Is that the one where giants like they were taken out? Because a paper ran an article that was like that the Museum of Natural History, I think it was, destroyed all of the giant bones kind of thing. But the problem was that the paper was sort of like the Onion kind of stuff. It was a joke paper, but unfortunately people took it as sort of serious and sort of spread it around. I mean, I can probably find it if you want, but I've done a fact check on that, and there's no actual. If you look into it, it was run as a joke rather than something serious originally.
I mean, if it was just the one claim, I would say, hey, sure, let's brush it off. But there have been so many claims just here in the North United States.
Stephen, did you define giant as just being over 8 feet tall? Because don't we have people like that just right now?
Well, that's true, we do now. But if you're looking back, say, 4,000 years ago, we'll say average height's about 4'5" to 5 feet. 8 foot tall is still going to be massive, right? In comparison.
Does it say how tall the Nephilim supposedly were?
I've heard calculations that Goliath reached 12 feet tall. I've never found that in the text, or I can't recall finding that in the text, but that is the Christian tradition.
Because one verse it says that they look like grasshoppers or something like that. There's like 3 references to Nephilim in the Bible. I think in Numbers or something it says that they look like grasshoppers.
So that's when they enter into the promised land. They send scouts, and the scouts of the children of Israel come back and tell Moses, or tell the children of Israel, that there are giants in the land that tower them so that they look like grasshoppers. But also, they bring back grape clusters, and the grape clusters are even so massive that it takes a team of men to carry the grape clusters back.
So really, I'd like to ask why a museum would destroy ancient sort of large human bones, like why that would be the case.
Well, I think for one reason, it would add validity to the scriptures. And I don't believe the atheist community would know quite where to put them in the history of mankind.
Well, I mean, not all museum curators and people involved in museums are atheists. I think that's sort of a wild mischaracterization. In fact, not everybody involved in science, paleontology in general, are atheists. I'm sure there are sort of Christian paleontologists and especially human paleontologists of
You're
Homo.
probably right, Mark. Atheist may have been the wrong word. I'll say evolutionists. People who ascribe to the evolution theory.
Well, it seems like a very large conspiracy theory, and I don't think that a sort of an overly large hominid species would necessarily sort of be a problem for evolution. Depends how large you're talking about here. I know that Neanderthal was, slightly larger than, say, for instance, Cro-Magnon, which was sort of a contemporary kind of, or Homo, the Devanosians. I can't remember the actual, sort of title for it, but they were slightly larger and heavier set kind of thing. But sort of compared to modern day Homo sapiens, that they weren't really like what you would consider a giant as such. So if you're talking about 8 feet tall, I don't see any claims that they've been found, even though sort of religious people have been searching. I see claims that they've been found and then destroyed. Whenever you fact check them and actually go into them, there's not a lot of evidence for that. Just sort of some conspiracy theories. So really, I'd sort of be asking like, why would they? I don't see why they would destroy something that could possibly be explained under evolution. I'm not quite sure why we would do
Well,
that.
how would evolution explain that, though? I mean,
How
how
would
would,
evolution
if you
explain that?
did find
Yeah.
a whole village of prehistoric giants,
Oh.
how would you fit them into the timeline?
Well, they would have to be sort of an offshoot of the sort of lineage of Homo sapiens, right? They couldn't be sort of alongside Homo sapiens because we just don't grow that big. So it would have to be an offshoot in some way. And depending on the numbers, yeah, there's offshoots of Homo sapiens all over the place. So if they split early enough, and had enough diverse features, then yeah, you could explain them. If it was the case that they're exactly the same as humans, then yeah, you'd have a bit of a problem, except for size, because
Well,
it's
here's the issue with that, though, Mark,
yeah.
is there are several different Native American tribes that they have found caves with writings about giants. So they
Okay.
apparently would have had to have coexisted with man, regardless of when you place that period of time.
Yeah, that would definitely be a problem.
Okay. Well, thank you for your honesty.
Cool. The question is, are they, because they also have writings about thunderbirds and other sort of things that we don't believe are real either. So are we saying that those things, like whatever they wrote about, is actually real? Are we actually saying that sort of because they wrote about thunderbirds, then our understanding of storm generation is wrong, and it's actually caused by massive birds?
That is an interesting point, and that is a fair point. I'll have to give you that.
Yeah,
Can I just chime in for a quick second and
Go
sure.
ahead,
just say
P-Town.
that my daughter is developing an Australian accent by watching way too much Bluey. It's a phenomenon.
What's
I know,
Bluey? I
Mark,
don't know.
you don't have kids, so you don't even know what I'm talking about. Hi, baby. Sorry.
I, I'm sorry, I don't know what Bluey is. I'm sorry.
I don't either. Dustin, you have a question, sir?
So, Mark, you're saying that it's a hoax whenever you read about like bones being destroyed. But I mean, when we look at the other end of the equation, say like Peltdown
You have
Man,
a
for
lot of
example,
background noise, Dustin. It's really hard to make out
I'm
what you're saying.
I'm really sorry. Give me a second. So, like, if you go to Piltdown Man, right?
Yeah.
Um, why is it that these hoaxes with Piltdown Man have so much longer legs than the supposed hoaxes of the bones being destroyed?
I'm not sure what you're saying. They
So
couldn't.
Piltdown Man, right?
Well, yeah, that was a
You,
hoax.
yeah, how long did it stand and was publicly verified before it had to be fixed? And then you're talking about the hoaxes where the bones were destroyed. And I mean, I really have to search to find what you're referring to. Why does the Piltdown Man have longer legs and the bones
Oh, you don't
are
mean
just kind of
physically? Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's because. Sorry, Dustin. I thought you meant longer legs, as in literally. Why does it have elongated sort of thigh bones and stuff? I do apologize. Yeah. So why does it last longer? Is what you're saying?
Yes, I'm kind of vicarious. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why is because I would presume is because it's pretty easy to sort of with this particular one, the one that I looked into, um, it's pretty easy to go and say, okay, the original story came from this place, and the place was a paper called World News Daily Report, and that World News Daily Report is a joke paper, like it's just like the Onion. It's not hard to find out. Whereas Piltdown Man was actually a pretty good forgery of sort of different bones and stuff. It also the case that Piltdown, I don't think that was giant per se, like not 8 feet tall as far as I know. So I
No, the
don't.
only two things that would relate the two is that you're claiming that the bones were being destroyed as a hoax, and so that we both know that
No,
uh, Piltdown Man is a hoax, right?
no.
And the bones being destroyed is a hoax. Why the popularity with Piltdown Man, but the ambiguity with the bones?
No. I'm not saying the bones being destroyed is a hoax. It's a fake story. Like a hoax is where you actually generate evidence to fool people. You go and you make something in order to fool people into the truth. This wasn't what happened. It was basically the giant bones kind of thing, that the Smithsonian's destroying giant bones was literally a fake story meant as humor. It wasn't a hoax.
Yeah, but the popularity though, right?
Of what?
I mean, if you're talking of Peltdown Man, for example, you even still see
Yeah.
certain references
Yeah.
to it in modern historical books. I'm just having a hard time understanding why Peltdown Man was such a popularized hoax, and the
Yes.
bones are so downplayed.
Well, there was no bones for a start. That's the whole point. Like, there wasn't any bones being put on display, shown to anybody. It was just a conspiracy story that the Smithsonian destroyed the bones of giants. Number two, the original intent of that article wasn't to fool people. Whereas Piltdown, it definitely, they were trying to forge it and make it look real. So the reason why Piltdown had longer legs, if you will, is because that was an intentional, very well done forgery. Whereas the one that you're talking about appears to be a rumor that descended from a joke article that was put on a paper that sort of did joke articles.
Okay, I guess we're not going to see eye to eye on this, but yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I just kind of wanted you to maybe look at it from my perspective.
Okay, yeah, no, I get what you're saying, that one of them, the Piltdown Man, took ages to falsify, and it did. It was multiple years. I think it was about 5 years to falsify. Although some paleontologists were calling it a hoax off the bat. It did take a while for us to be sure that it was a hoax. Absolutely, no, I get what you're saying. Whereas, sort of, so it's the problem is that if we treat all conspiracy theories as true, that sort of, museums are doing this or the government's doing that or whatever, what have you, you quickly get into believing in things without sufficient evidence to warrant them. And the case of the Smithsonian destroying bones, we're kind of very certain where that came from. And it came from the World News Daily Report, which is it's a fake news website. It's a satirical news website.
Can I ask you a question, Mark?
Of
Well,
course.
actually, it's about 3 questions, but they're short questions. Okay, so take the example of the flood. Christianity, it's not the only religion from around the world to acknowledge a worldwide flood, or at least a sequence of local floods, right? There are all types of religions that confirm that. So we could probably safely say at some point in history, there was either a global flood or a series of local floods. Would you say that's fair?
No, definitely not. No.
Really?
Yeah, the problem is that I mean, a lot of cultures do have stories about floods. That's the thing. There are cultures that have stories about big floods, and they're very notable, like the Chinese, for instance, with the Yang River
Gilgamesh too.
flooding. Well, sure, but that is the same area, and I would sort of, with the parallels between the Atrahasa epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible, I would say one is based off the other. There's too many parallels to it not to be. The thing is that you have societies which didn't record this flood at all and went straight through the flood with no problems whatsoever. The Japanese, for instance, went straight through without recording a flood, didn't have a problem with it. Their society progressed from sort of Paleolithic to sort of Iron Age without having any disturbance whatsoever, and we can see that in the archaeological record. And it's interesting to note that the Yang River flood that you're talking about, is it the Yellow River flood? Yellow River it is. That was apparently solved by one of their heroes who turned the river aside and saved all these villages and stuff. That didn't actually happen over the entire world. What we would expect to see with a global flood is that there should be a complete disturbance in the societies all over the world, not just in one place, but everywhere. And we don't see that, unfortunately.
Well, that sort of derails my next question then. I thought you would acknowledge, to be honest, that if like 19 different civilizations claimed there was a global flood, that there was possibly a at least large-scale flood, either locally all around the world simultaneously or a worldwide global flood. But you don't concede to that, and that's fine. My related point was that giants are mentioned in Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Hindu mythology, Christianity, and a whole slew of other religions and ancient peoples. I mean, don't you think that offers some sort of credibility that we should look into honestly?
Well, that's true, but fairies are mentioned in a whole bunch of other of civilizations. They're mentioned in Germanic. They're mentioned in sort of forest spirits are mentioned in Native American mythology. Um,
Christianity mentions them too. We call them demons.
yeah, okay. Well, I'm not sure why I would think that fairies actually exist. I don't think that's a very I don't see any evidence that that is actually the case. There's a lot of these things that are mentioned in a lot of different mythologies. It seems to be that we that humans sort of make these stories, and these stories, because we're all humans, seem to have sort of consistent um, basis for them. For instance, I think the Greek one is the only one that mentions the Cyclops, the one-eyed giant kind of thing. We think that is the case, or it has been postulated, I should say, because it's not really certain, but it's been postulated that the case that they found a elephant skull that looks like a skull with one eye, but that's actually the nasal cavity, so they may have been mistaken on that. And that is a good point, that people could have found bones that were incredibly large. Like if you find a femur and it's incredibly larger than any animal you've ever seen, you could say, hey, that's the bones of giants. In fact, I think Norse mythology has the world being made out of Ymir, the ice giant. Like, so how much credibility are we going to give these giants? Is the world made of an ice giant? I don't think so. But in order to sort of accept these, you've got to reject certain parts of them. And so we're sort of saying, well, why aren't you being critical of the things that agree with your doctrine? Hello?
Well, that answers my questions. Dustin is dying to repeat his question. Dustin, are you at a place where you can repeat your question? Because I don't remember what it was.
I'm not trying to repeat my question. Somebody said I wasn't making sense, and I was trying to get to the key of that issue. He's saying my question doesn't make sense. I think Mark understood it quite well.
Um, I think so. It makes sense. There's a couple. I think it was completely lucid, and just sort of as a question, it's fine. Sort of. So why did Piltdown Man have such a greater length of time that it fooled us than destruction of bones in the Smithsonian? And I think it just comes down to the evidence for both of them. I don't think it's a question that's particularly doesn't make sense. It just is. It's a good question. Why is one um, um, sort of sit at the forefront of the human civilizations and the other one is sort of dismissed out of hand? I think it's a fair question. And I think that comes down to the amount of evidence for both. While the evidence for the Piltdown was a very good forgery by somebody that knew what they were doing, the evidence is the other one is a either a story or just a series of rumors that have been around. When you trace them back, and there's people that do trace the origin of these stories, like fact checking sites and things like that. It seems to come from a satirical thing. So it's just the evidence is what will cause something to remain sort of in the public eye or not. That's about all.
So you don't think that the ire and prestige of a professor claiming that this is the way it is didn't have anything to do with that?
The ire and prestige. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So if I was, say I was one of your college professors, would you accept my grade that I put on your paper if you say you feel like you deserve a better grade, or would you just live with the grade that I marked it on?
Oh, I've certainly gone to lecturers before and said, "Hey, I feel like I deserve a better grade, and here's why." That's entirely reasonable. You
Well,
seem yeah.
okay, but I'm talking about like the mass majority. Like if you're average Joe on the street, right, and you're hearing Mr. Prestigious professor being acknowledged and announced before he makes his pronouncements,
Yes.
that kind of puts a little bit of a weight towards what this man is saying, whether or not he's right.
Sure. I mean, when you're a lecturer, yeah, you're sort of you do have the final word. Or if you're marking the papers, sure. I think that you're sort of making the mistake that they're basically saying, hey, you can't bring me anything and question me. My sort of designation is authoritative.
No,
Am I
no.
misunderstanding?
That's not where I'm
Okay,
going with that.
sorry. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
no, I'm
certain
not
what you're talking
saying
about
that
then.
you say somebody who has the intelligence, say another professor, could come and challenge those ideas.
Anyone
But if I
can.
am average Joe, well,
Well,
okay,
anyone
but they're
can.
not going to listen to me if I come up into a professor's office and I say you're wrong for
Yeah.
XYZ reasons. They're going to laugh me out of the office.
Yeah. So here's the thing. There's a certain way of presenting evidence in academia, right? There's a certain way we go about saying, hey, this is how we challenge an idea that's been established in academia. It will involve papers and peer review and all of the processes that we have to sort of make sure that wrong information, like the Piltdown Man, isn't put into the public sphere as truth.
Mark,
Yeah.
could I ask you a fair question? If I was to show you actual evidence of giants, would you at least consider the possibility?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I share my screen with you?
Sure.
Let me see here. Okay, are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a finger bone that was found in the Middle East, and I got to hold this in my hand. It's an actual finger bone. Can you imagine how big that person would have had to be? Okay. This is another one that I was able to hold. This is a smaller finger bone, but still massively larger than a full-size woman's finger. But this one is the most impressive. This is a toe bone. How large do you think this person would have to be for this to be a bone in the toe?
Well, hold on. How do you know it was from a person?
Well, they've had it tested by scientists.
That toe bone, I have to question that one.
Well, did they sort of publish anything on it?
This is from the Ron Wyatt collection.
Oh.
And 3 different scientists tested it and confirmed its authenticity.
Right,
Yeah.
like if
Hear
I
me
was
out,
Ron Wyatt.
but refused to publish it.
Well, the problem with Ron Wyatt is he's claimed to have made many discoveries over the years that haven't actually been true. For instance,
The problem with what you said, though, is I've held the claims in my hand. What do you do with the fact, even the finger bone? That is a human finger bone.
Has anybody sort of have you published anything on it? Has anybody from sort of a
lot has been published on Ron Wyatt.
Yeah, Ron Wyatt, he claimed to find the Ark, and it turned out to be a limonite deposit. He claimed to do a lot of things.
The Noah's Ark site is not a limonite deposit. That's been disproven multiple times now. Even the Turkish government recognizes it as Noah's Ark.
Yeah,
Look who made it in the room.
Hey, how's it going, Jeremiah?
Do that. Like the University of California sent people over there, and it is most definitely not a natural rock outcropping, not petrified wood.
That has been disproven multiple times now.
What do you mean?
What put it there then?
What do you mean? What put it there?
If I
How
may
did it get there?
real quick,
I can find
there
the paper.
is on the scholarly.
Please do on that one. I want to see.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry.
On Scholarly, you can actually Google, because we have to use Scholarly for any of our college coursework. It's one of the few accepted platforms. And on there, you can pull up the research from the scientists that have been finding the giant bones. And they have tested them, and they are showing human DNA with 1 chromosome difference, though. But yeah, you can actually pull that up on a college accepted site. And I'm trying to look for it right now.
So what was the argument that humans can't be
'Cause-
large? That was the argument? Can't be large people?
No, the argument is about the difference in rumors, for example, why certain rumors have longer legs than others, and the pronouncement of evidence and whether or not it's taken seriously.
Oh yeah, well we're never gonna agree on that because it's always gonna be, well, what's the proof? What's this? What's that? I mean, humans can be larger. I don't get it. I don't get why humans can't be larger. We see them today. We see over 7 feet people. But what's the problem? I don't get it.
Well, I mean,
Hey, Mark.
the problem is that we don't have evidence that people seem to be getting larger as time goes on. Like back in the sort of days of Napoleon and stuff, nobody was 7 feet tall. Like it just wasn't happening.
We don't know that because we
Well,
don't
we
have
don't-
access
we
to
don't
everybody in the world.
explore that,
That's ridiculous to say that.
Napoleon's time.
Come on now. We have access to every person that ever lived in Africa or Asia or India, the dark continent, and all the rest of that. We don't have access to everybody to say that. You're just assuming that from what we know from the Western world.
Well, I mean, we've to sort of say that we don't have access to everybody in the world, therefore there could be sort of, giant humans out there somewhere. I've got no reason to believe that. I think that's just sort of making a statement that has no. I mean, we have explored a large quantity of the world, and I think there's only a few tribes that sort of, very remote tribes that we haven't come in contact with. The North Sentinelese Island, for instance, that sort of resists all contact. But we've seen pictures of them.
That's the one off the coast of India?
Yeah. But we have seen pictures of them. They're not giants, but there's very few humans in the world that haven't had contact with the greater population. I don't know where you think these people are.
I don't say they are. I said it's a possibility. Or for you to say they weren't
I mean, that's like saying there's
it can't be a proven fact. You always want
basically.
You always want facts, so Mark. You always ask for facts, like the carnal mind thing. But you can't say that when you don't know about the whole world. Let me ask you this, Mark. Do you believe that there is evidence of larger animals and insects in the fossil record in the past?
Let's go back a bit, Stump, because you sort of said I asked for facts because I've got a carnal mind, and I don't know why this would be a problem. Sort of so. The whole idea that I have to see something other than facts seems to be baffling to me. Why would I pay attention to, or at least give the credibility I would a fact to rumors and speculation and sort of religious doctrine? I mean, if something's a fact, doesn't that
broke your own rule?
Greater weight?
You just broke your own rule. You said that in Napoleon times there was nobody above whatever height. You can't say that.
Rule.
Definitely, that's a rumor. That's an assumption of yours, but you can't say that.
Let's have a fun back and forth, but let's make sure to let both sides be able to finish their whole thought, to be fair.
So we found sort of, let's look at what the evidence says, that during the days of Napoleon, lots of people were killed. We've got lots of battlefields out there, lots of human remains around the place. It was a particularly violent time. We've never found anybody sort of approaching 7 foot in size. So where is your information coming from that there were these people out there?
I never said that word.
That doesn't go against the Bible timeline.
You're eliminating you just estimate. You're making an assumption that it wasn't, but you couldn't possibly know that. That's like saying all people believe in God, but you couldn't possibly know that because you don't know all people.
What's that, Adam?
Mark, are you saying that prior to this, 1800s or 1700s, no one was taller than 7 feet?
Well, I think
because that seems like a bizarre claim to me.
Well, I think that there would be sort of an anomaly that humans are definitely growing larger. That sort of, I mean, we get people nowadays that sort of are I think the tallest was 11 feet in size, but he had all kinds of health problems and kind of died. We're sort of not talking about people with sort of growth disorders or anything like that. We're talking about a sort of a population curve where a significant amount of the population is above 6 feet.
So you mean like an entire population is what you?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be an entire population, but sort of we'd look.
Because gigantism is like, you agree that gigantism is a real thing today, and no doubt existed more than 100 years ago.
Yes, but
and that's someone over 8 feet or something is gigantism.
I
or 7 feet.
Well, Adam, let me finish. So I wouldn't say gigantism would be included in that, because that isn't sort of part of the normal population. That's definitely a uh, a disorder kind of thing. It's not the normal human
Is that a recessive gene, Mark?
phenotype. What?
Gigantism?
Yeah, but to being taller than your parents is a dominant gene. Like, you are 3/4 likely to be taller than your parents, and we've got the statistics about that to say, hey, yes, that is the case. Being taller than your parents is a dominant gene. Like,
So you're saying you
who's
don't
here?
believe there was a population of giants?
No, I don't think there was a population of giants, and I don't think that a while ago, when you look at the heights of people, as long as we're measuring them, they have gone, like, the bell curve, if you will, of people has shifted up rather than down, and that is due to the
Right.
genetics of sort of height. I mean, who here is taller than their parents? I know I was.
I am, so that's fair. I think a question that would arise would be, well, first of all, that opens up a whole bunch of more doorways. Okay,
Can I just-
recessive gene. Go ahead,
sorry.
Adam. No,
I
go
was going
ahead.
to say, because I wasn't 100% clear from Mark. Mark, are you saying that you don't believe that there are any individuals with gigantism prior to a certain time, or you
No,
think
no.
that you're
I
saying
think that I'm
like
sort of
myths of an entire population?
Yeah, no, I'm sort of discounting people with gigantism from the normal population, because we're not talking about somebody with a growth, a genetic illness that makes them grow to a very large height. We're talking about fixed morphologies in the human genome. So
Okay.
I don't think sort of including people with gigantism. Just like if I
If
said, hey, if during Napoleon's time people grew between 4 foot something to 6 foot maximum, that was the bell curve for normal human distribution. I don't think I would be including sort of people with dwarfism in that, for instance. Like, it is an anomaly.
you said though it's common for us to be taller than our parents, though, correct? And I
Yeah.
agree with you because I'm taller than both of my parents. So my question is, 2,000 years ago,
Yeah.
if you have someone who's 8 foot tall, he's the only 8 foot tall dude in the village. In 6 villages over, there's an 8 foot tall woman, and they have a child. Wouldn't that child then be 8 foot 2,
Sure.
8 foot 3?
Well, I mean, yeah, 3/4 chance, yeah, because it's a dominant gene. Yeah. Presumably that's if
I mean,
we did the
then I
Genesis
see the
thing, right?
possibility of a whole tribe of giants being very realistic.
Also, if
Well,
we're just going by a skeleton, how do we know if it's just an individual with a condition, or if you know what I mean? How would you rule that out?
yeah, so that's an interesting question. Usually there's some markers on bone growth to show that somebody had gigantism. Their bones grow in certain ways that are sort of have stress fractures and a lot of problems with them.
Hmm.
We know this because we've studied the bones of people that do have gigantism. And
Also, the calcium and density.
I think, I'm not sure if that's one of the markers. Could well be, but they do have markers to show when a person does have gigantism in the past. Yeah.
Do you think that there's anything, Mark, in principle that is like absurd about? I mean, to me, if there was a population of humans that were all 9 feet tall, there's nothing bizarre or crazy. Like, there's nothing like supernatural about that. But do you think that there's something about that just defies our understanding of science, or do you just particularly don't see any evidence for believing in it?
Oh, I don't see any evidence for believing in it, and sort of
Okay, yeah.
the evidence that has been presented has been things like rumors, or a religious conviction, or things like that
Right.
I don't
But what
hold.
about the giant finger bone I just showed you
Well,
that I held in my own hand?
yeah, I don't
I
know.
mean, it's real. It's not fake. I've held it.
No, I get that. I get that. But I would have to know that that's human. So I would want sort of a paleoanthropologist to evaluate that thing, not just sort of Ron Wyatt.
Can you think of any other kind of species that would have an elongated fingers like that with
Yeah.
multiple joints that match a human?
What do you mean by match a human?
Well, joints in a finger that are elongated
Well,
not hunched over like an ape. I mean,
lots of
it's definitely
animals have
human finger.
jointed finger bones. That's not unusual in the slightest.
Any of them that match this description.
Well, I mean, match the description. I'm not sure what you're like. Sort of, so that the morphology of
Would look like this.
animals
Yeah.
are generally all the same. Even whales have finger bones in their flippers, and it's sort of without expertise, it's very hard to tell the difference between a finger bone from a whale and a finger bone from.
Would it change your mind at all if I told you that this was found in an ancient gravesite?
Not really. I
Like
mean,
a human gravesite?
if it's wrong.
Can you show the picture again, Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, it definitely looks. If you just see it at first, looks like a human finger, right? Like,
I mean, it's without a question. But
Well,
I understand what you're
That's
saying.
a problem because we don't just look at things and say, "Well, it looks like a human finger." We'll categorize it as a human finger, kind of thing. Yeah, I would definitely want a paleo sort of a paleontologist or a paleoanthropologist to look at that.
And the same thing for this one?
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, I don't know how to look at something and say that is a human bone. That's the whole point about some of these discoveries, like Piltdown Man. You can be very, very easily fooled. Because if you don't have the training, and even if you do have the training, sometimes forgeries and sort of other things can completely fool you. I don't know how, like if I put a finger bone from a whale and a finger bone from some other animal, could you tell them apart? Like if I put a finger bone from a whale and a finger bone from a elephant, could you tell them apart?
I think if I dug the bone up in an elephant graveyard, I could safely say that this is more likely an elephant bone than a whale bone. Would you concede to that point?
Well,
And this bone was found in a human grave.
yes.
So I think that analogy lines up beautifully.
Like I get what you're saying, but what have you actually taken this to paleoanthropologists and got them to evaluate it? And if not, why not? Like, because
It has been evaluated by 3 different paleontologists
Who were they?
who've confirmed that it's human, but they will not come forward because of fear of scrutiny.
Why not? I mean, this would be a incredible discovery. This would be a really incredible discovery.
Right, because all the other times that people have claimed to found this discovery, it was welcomed with open arms. In most cases, I'd say that they were scrutinized by the scientific community.
Well, that's what science
Relentlessly.
does. You always scrutinize everything under science. That's the whole point. Mary Schweitzer was scrutinized a whole lot, but she was, she had the facts on her side. So my question is, if these guys have the facts on their side, why won't they come forward? Is it because they fear scrutiny?
If you really did believe that any time the bones of giants were sent in to be scientifically evaluated, they ended up disappearing, and you did in fact believe that you had authentic giant bones in your possession, do you really believe, without a bias, that you would have no issue sending them in to be evaluated and trust that they come back to you?
Yeah, I would have no issue with that at all. I don't know why.
Really?
If you've got the truth on your side, what have you got to fear? Do you think that the churches aren't waiting for exactly this thing to back up their claims? Do you think that there's nobody who is a believer in Christianity that could do the evaluation for you? Do you really think that look, there is no evidence to suggest things are disappearing? That is just a conspiracy theory. That's all it is. And when I've looked into this, there is literally zero evidence that anybody is taking these fossils and destroying them, and sort of so making sort of accusations because you want this to be true. I think it's kind of insulting to the people that do the work in the field, evaluating this stuff.
Mark,
Yeah.
can we get back to my original question? Do you believe that in the fossil record that there are larger things like insects and animals found within that record that do not conform to what we believe they should be growing nowadays.
What do you mean should be growing now? I mean,
Well, you said that it goes giants in the past or larger
sure.
humans. I don't know why we keep going to giant. What size is a giant? 7 foot. You go to the NBA camp, you go see they're giants compared to me. But you're saying that's not normal for now. Everything men are getting larger now.
Yes.
They're getting larger now, so therefore they weren't larger in the back. That's your reasoning. The way I understand it. So if there's fossil records showing larger insects and animals, yet they're small today, it doesn't show, and they're getting larger, maybe a little bit here and there.
No. Well,
It's the same thing. But there's yet a record that we I think that we would agree that there is a record of a fossil record of larger animals and insects in the past.
sure, there's definitely megafauna, and definitely there has been larger insects in the past, sure, but that doesn't mean that there were larger humans in the past. And you would have to provide some sort of evidence for that claim, something that we can
But
actually
there was even a larger
well,
scale
just one
great
second,
white in
just
the.
one second.
Go ahead.
Something we can evaluate to find the truth of that. I don't, you're making a lot of these claims that there definitely were larger people, but where is the evidence to back it up? It seems to me, and this is just what it seems to me, is that you've got a religious idea, that a faith-based idea that these people, there were giants in the past. And so any evidence is good enough to back up that claim. And unfortunately, the scientific world and the rest of the world doesn't work like that. We base what we think is true upon the evidence provided, and the evidence provided is nothing.
Well, I never said that they were giant. What does a giant mean? Is a 7 footer a giant in the past? Could it be a giant now? You said people were smaller in the past, right?
don't know.
Napoleon, they were smaller.
I don't know.
During biblical
Mark,
times,
you do the
that's
same
the problem.
thing.
We're not defining what a giant is. A giant could be
Mhm.
7 foot tall back in the past. Is that unusual? Could there people consider people giants that were 7 feet when they were 5? The average height was 5'5", 5'6", so they were smaller in the past.
Adam,
Stephen
make your
started-
point.
Yeah, just real quick, I was going to say, Stephen pointed out, like, I thought that you'd define it as over 8 feet, right?
I would define 8 foot or higher giant. Yeah.
And that was what Mark was responding to.
Why,
That was your
though?
specific way you
Why
put
are we
it.
defining that as there's no biblical thing that tells us how big a giant is. The only description we have that I know of is of Goliath.
There
And
is
that doesn't mean that
tradition
they were
that
all giants. That's what the Bible considered giants. Plus, that word we looked up in the Bible, giants didn't mean giants. It was just an English translation. It made like a bad person, evil person, bully. That's what the definition said in Strong. So
yeah, but a
I
bad
think
person
we're
or
arguing about the
unholy
wrong thing.
an unholy or bad person doesn't make me look like a grasshopper stump, so I'm not sure if that applies. But we'll circle back around.
Wow.
P-Town, you got interrupted.
No, I was the one interrupting.
Oh, okay. Did
So
you
I'm the
want to make a
guilty
point,
one.
though?
Oh, I was just telling Mark that he does the same thing. I can't remember what it was though.
Well,
What were we
I'd
talking
like
about,
to
Mark?
know what I'm doing the same thing on, sort of saying, hey, we have no evidence of this happening, and so therefore, I think that was relation to.
Something about your beliefs project what you think that you know.
Well,
If
I
that
mean,
reminds you
I
of where you're
would
going.
I would hope that we sort of agree that the material world exists around us. As far as presuppositions go, I think that's my major one. Sort of that and sort of a logical system, sort of the logical absolutes are my major presuppositions. I don't think I make any other presuppositions, and I sort of, so if you're saying, hey, I'm dismissing Christianity because of my bias towards non-Christianity, I could leverage the same accusation against you for not believing the claims of Islam or Hinduism or any of these other religions, or not believing that Cyclops did roam the earth because the Greeks recorded Cyclops roaming the earth. Or the Thunderbird because you've got a bias against Native American religions, kind of thing. So,
Oh, come on, Mark. You know what you're doing. Like,
what?
let's keep it simple. Atheists
Okay.
have their biases. Christians have their biases. I mean,
I would say everybody has their biases.
it's okay.
So that's
Yeah.
that's the whole point. The whole point of the methods of science is to try and eliminate bias. It's to try and eliminate it. So, for a start, the peer review process has multiple people look at it from multiple different origins and sort of comment only on the facts of it. comment only on sort of replicating what they've done. So that's what we're trying to do with science. We're trying to eliminate bias. Science isn't an atheist thing. It's just a thing that seems to be a good method for finding out what's real and what isn't real.
Well,
like,
okay, you say that
let's talk about
science
the
isn't
wrong
an atheist thing,
discoveries.
but
Yeah.
but that's what they majorly use as a crutch to walk through anything that has anything to do with religion, right? They say, well, we have science and we point to it, and then we pretend as though science is majorly in favor of evolution. I mean, we still haven't proven evolution. Are you willing to stipulate to that fact?
Well, I don't know how you're using the word proof there. Science doesn't usually prove things.
You went there. You went. Okay,
Well,
you got me there. You win that
I
one.
was gonna.
Okay,
Yeah,
you win that one.
if you just sort of let me finish, I think that while it doesn't have proofs like maths, it would have sort of local proofs. So things that we would say, hey, the evidence has overcome its burden of proof, if that makes sense. Now, as far as evolution is concerned, it is absolutely been proven, if you will, met the burden of proof so far, that it's sort of got a mountain of evidence behind it, which is
There's
almost.
It
There's
depends on
that-
how. That depends on how
there's
you
that
define
bias.
evolution.
That bias. I mean, you're telling me that science is about scrutinizing the facts,
Yes.
but we haven't proven evolution. But your threshold is satisfied, so I should quit asking.
No.
Okay,
Science,
P-Town,
no, he said
P-Town, go
science
ahead.
can't. He said science can't prove anything, but actually, it can prove evolution. That's
So
the summary of what he said.
I think I can't remember who it was. Was it Popper, about what he wrote about science? That because if you take proof to mean it has been it is set in stone and unquestionable, then science doesn't get to proof, because nothing is unquestionable in science. You're allowed to go and say, hey, I don't think the theory of evolution is right. I want to challenge it. That is more than acceptable in science. However, you
try doing that with climate change. Try doing that with climate change.
Hold on, Dustin. Let's try to stay on one topic at a time, to be fair.
Well, I mean, the scientific consensus is really what we go with, because that usually is the most reliable way to.
Science is not done by consensus.
Jeremiah, go ahead.
What?
I hate to interrupt and everything, so I'm going to try to get this out as fast as possible. First, if we're looking at proof, I do have a few pictures here. This one is in Mount Blanco Museum. It's the picture of a human femur. Everybody can see that?
Yes.
If we go to the next one, this is the fossilized imprint of a human foot. No other creature on the planet has the same footprint as us. That is a adult human sitting in it, having his foot in it. And talking about evidence and everything, I wanted to point out that we have had proof that a lot of the evolution theories are indeed false, yet they keep putting it in. One that I have with me right now, from my 9th grade science test, I have the paper still with me right here. They teach that whales have these little bones that used to be leg bones. Yet it's been proven years ago that these bones are used for mating, and a bunch of muscles attached to those for mating, that they have no evidence that they ever became from legs. Yeah, I have right here a picture of that very thing being taught in my 9th grade science class back when I was in high school. So
but Jeremiah, let me
false doctrine.
be facetious here for you. Like, it's the scientific consensus that those birthing bones were once used to walk on.
Yeah,
it's the consensus of the scientists.
But they have no proof.
Yeah.
That's my
So
point.
No,
I
it's
think-
true,
I think
but it's the consensus.
I think it's
Therefore,
fair
it's
if you
science.
sort of let me
It's their opinion.
respond to that. So they're a vestigial structure, and vestigial doesn't mean useless. It means that it has changed in origin. We can see a long line of fossils where these bones have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, leading up to the modern whale. It is not a great stretch of the imagination, not just sort of made up that they're sort of taking this from nowhere. How is it that we have these what appear to be transitional fossils of mammals with smaller and smaller leg bones getting more and more aquatic, and then we have the whale, and this is ordered into the fossil record over a certain amount of time. So they're basing it upon that, not upon just sort of making it up, Jeremiah. I think that's that sort of thing. Now, the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum. No, let me address all of your points, like, because you sort of brought up multiple
Hi,
points.
Dustin.
So I don't want to let sort of you go from point to point to point and then move on
I really
without me
think that it's
addressing them.
important that we address Vestigial though.
Well, hold on though. Before we move on,
You know,
let
Mark,
Mark.
I mean-
Before we move on, let's let Mark respond to each point. After Mark's done, Mark, let me know, and we'll move on to other conversation or follow up.
Yeah, so the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum is run by a guy who says that it is giants against evolution, and he basically has never had these things analyzed in the slightest. He's just put them in his museum and claimed they are human bones. The other one that is doing it is Genesis Park. Sort of so the problem is that have they actually been analyzed by people who know how? Because don't forget, Piltdown Man fooled the world for many years. Why is it that they won't get them actually analyzed? Is it because they are forgeries? Is that print a forgery? How do you know?
I think it's fair to say that it's more that we're scared if we release our information, you guys are going to destroy it in the process of evaluating it, and then our proof is gone. And that seems to be a common occurrence in many different reports. Also, I think you would have to concede to the point that there's a difference between bias, which everyone has, and an extreme bias, which I think evolutionists have, because when the ancient Norse, the ancient Israelites, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Hindus, and other multiple cultures around the world all tell stories, even the Native Americans, about giants, to go out of our way to say they never existed, I don't know, I think that's kind of arrogant. Not that you're arrogant, but I think that's a little arrogant.
So the only bias in science is to methodological naturalism. So we can't start with any assumptions that are based in the supernatural. And there's a very good reason for that. So as long as it is part of the natural world, then the bias will be to finding whatever it is physically that is the truth. That's it. There's this whole idea that there's sort of scientists, scores of scientists out there trying to change things and distort things and stuff like that. It's just a conspiracy theory. I'm really sorry you guys were told this and believed it, and you still believe that there's this, cadre of people.
Well, not just us. These are ancient conspiracy theories, apparently, that were so popular they reached around the world.
Yeah, they're still just conspiracy. There is no group of people trying to put down.
Do we have any examples of ancient peoples writing about conspiracy theories? I understand mythology, but specifically conspiracy theories.
Well, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know of any sort of writings about paleoanthropologists in particular. I know that sort of there's a lot of mythological sort of writings about things. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Grayson, you unmuted.
I was just going to say there are a tremendous amount, like the Rape of the Rhine. They made up all sorts of conspiracy theories to make their historical opponents look terrible or to make them look like lesser humans. So yes, there are a tremendous amount of conspiracies recorded throughout known history.
Sure.
And
well, I
historians
agree with
have
that.
to weed out these lies to get to the truth.
Sure.
I agree with that, and
Yeah.
Egypt is a perfect example of that. Egypt was known for distorting history in favor of them to make them look better. That's exampled with the Hittite battle.
I think a lot of nations do. I think a lot of nations do distort history to make them... history is written by the victors. I mean, I can point to the Tudors, who had Shakespeare write Richard III to say that Richard III was this hunchback, horrible person, evil and stuff, where we found through historical records that he was nothing of the sort. we've found pictures, paintings of him, and he wasn't a hunchback, and he wasn't all the things that were made out.
He is the one that had like 6 or 7 wives killed, though, right?
No, that's Henry Tudor, not Richard III. Right. So
Oh, sorry.
Henry Tudor wrote or commissioned the plays and commissioned all of these writings that we sort of now know to be a bit propagandary, sure. And I'm not saying that conspiracies don't happen, but we've got to have, like, the problem is if you believe conspiracies without evidence that they are in fact conspiracies, then in order to be intellectually consistent, you would have to believe any rumor coming your way. We need to have a certain amount of evidence to think that there is actually a conspiracy in the works, or else to me it seems like bias if you're just saying, well, here's a conspiracy, there's not a lot of evidence behind it, but I believe it because it backs up my faith, or backs up my opinion on this, or backs up my opinion on that. Whereas,
well, to be fair, though, it's not just me that believes it. It's the ancient Norse, the ancient Israelites, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Hindu, and Native Americans.
Well, not that there's a conspiracy.
And the atheists.
True.
Are you talking about believing in giants, Stephen?
Yes.
But I guess in the modern day, couldn't you just take a picture of all of your evidences and then take pictures of you giving your evidence to someone? It just seems fairly unlikely that you could get rid of solid evidence in a world with as much recording and information gathering as we have now. It might have been possible in a long time ago, I'll give you that. But currently, if you really want to say, here's some evidence, it's never going to be destroyed, it seems like that's possible.
That's fair. Do you think there's maybe possibly still some PTSD in the Christian community, though, from previous times when that may have occurred? So we would still be skeptical of trusting the scientific community with our evidence again?
Just further to that, sort of, just to sort of back up what Grayson said, like, the Vatican has a science department, and religious organizations have science departments. Ones that, for instance, BioLogos is a science site with sort of very experienced scientists on board. And I disagree with their religious beliefs, but as far as science is concerned, they are definitely reputable, because they do not allow the religious bias to influence their scientific credibility.
Well, you're also like supporting the same people that persecuted people like Galileo, and that you use against us, when it's convenient for you.
Galileo. Well, yeah, Galileo did sort of support a heliocentric model, and he was persecuted for it. I'm not sure what that's got to do with anything.
It's completely relevant. I think that we have to make a distinction between religion within the scientific community as well, Mark. I think that's important.
Religion in the
because it has happened
community.
historically.
Oh, there's no doubt.
As far
as I said, everybody has
in terms
bias.
of just beating the same drum and following protocols and whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a religion. I think we should be aware of that.
Are you trying to claim that science is a religion?
In some cases, yes, historically.
So let me guess, anything that you disagree with is the religion? Is that what you're saying, Peter?
Well, to be fair, Mark, be fair, they called people who played with electricity magicians. That's just science, right? I mean, they had seances where they got a bunch of people together, and this guy had a static generator in the background, and he would shock people using science, pretending that it was magic. These shows are not unheard of or nothing that are new, that, or at least as far as I'm concerned with your research, you should probably know about this. But I mean, any indistinguishable technology, any technology any technology
technology is indistinguishable from magic.
It's indistinguishable from magic. Yes, that's exactly where I was going.
When we define what is science and what is used as the scientific method, it doesn't mean that anything that uses a product of science is science, right? So if we use a projector to project a movie onto the screen, that isn't science. You're just using the products that science has given us, the result of science. Okay, so I want to make this really clear. What science is a
no, Mark.
So
no, it's unacceptable.
What's unacceptable?
Grayson,
for you
let
to
him
say
finish.
that
Hold on.
that's science.
Hold on, guys.
P-Town,
guys,
please let
hold
him
on.
finish.
Well,
and after Mark finishes, I really want to get Adam in.
Yes.
So go ahead, Mark.
Science is a system of methods. It's multiple methods, but they all follow the same general methodology, the same general way of doing things, and that's observation, asking questions, hypothesize, testing with falsification, peer review or publishing of the report, and then repeated testing of hypothesis in order to come up with a model to describe reality. That is what science is. So when you're talking about science, does science do this or does science do that? Running a projector, you're just using technology which has been a result of the scientific process. You're not engaging in some kind of scientific process, unless you're doing a psychological experiment on some people somewhere in the background. You're just entertaining people with a projector. But I mean, I'd love to know what P-Town's
almost every science.
Sorry, go Adam.
Go ahead, P-Town.
Oh, real quick. Well,
my bad.
Actually,
go ahead, Adam.
Finish your thought, because I don't want to change the topic.
I didn't know who was talking. I do apologize.
Yeah, sorry. But Dustin, go ahead and finish.
So, but okay, what you're describing is the scientific method, right?
Yep.
Okay, and that's how someone would get to a point sufficient where their understanding is superior to anyone else around them. So at that point, if you were a seeker of truth and you have this truth that you have learned through science, is that not a form of religion that you are trying to spread the truth to other people?
No. So I have a sort of problem with the way you describe that their knowledge is superior to other people. No, that's not really what we try to do. What we do is we create a model that fits and is workable in what we observe. So the whole point about testable predictions is that when you use the model that science produced, you should be able to use what it says to make predictions about how things occur, or in some way have your model be useful in some way. Like even if it's in history, like you're re-examining bones, you should say, hey, if we examine this city in this location, our model says we should see these deviations or this kind of thing from them, or this kind of, it should be useful in some way. So I don't think when you say, oh, the knowledge is greater, because when you're publishing, you're sharing that with the world. Your knowledge isn't greater than anybody else's. You might have two people in the same field whose knowledge on different things is more than another person's. Like we don't claim that kind of thing. It's very strange that the way that you put it.
I will see your rebuttal, and I will raise you a Hiroshima. There was not one person in Hiroshima knew anything about a nuclear bomb. But that was magic to them. They had no way to continue their war. That was a magic bomb that was dropped on them. And as far as they were concerned, they had no understanding.
What?
The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima.
Right.
The nuclear bomb. When we went back on Pearl Harbor, we had a superior knowledge in nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Any technology sufficient. Okay. Yeah. We had the truth, right? And then we exposed the truth. Now everybody knows. That's not a religion. You weren't trying to change the world by exposing the truth.
No, we didn't have magic. We had a knowledge of how particle physics worked, and we applied the model in order to release a tremendous amount of energy. I would say that the
potato.
Well, I would say that the government knew that it wasn't a magic bomb. I mean, I have no way to know what the people of Hiroshima thought, whether they thought it was, some sort of hideous new weapon that had been invented for the purposes of destroying them. They may have thought that as well. I think it's very difficult to say that they believed it was magic. I think that's a sort of claim that is a bit unreasonable, considering that people had seen explosions before, and they didn't just think, hey, there's
at it now.
Yeah.
Looking at it now, we can say that, but We didn't see
Sure.
explosions at anything near that yield. It was carpet bombing before the fact.
Yeah.
It was just one bomb and it took out millions of people. I mean, that's not magic. You can't concede that one point that in the mind of a Chinese or Japanese or whoever was watching this this giant fireball without an explanation wouldn't think that there's a supernatural explanation.
Oh, maybe. I think that's reasonable. That certainly some people thought it was magic. I think that's reasonable. I don't know how you know that all of them thought it was magic. But what we didn't do is
I didn't say all of them.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not sure where
let's
this
go
point
ahead
is
and
going. I'm completely lost as to where this is
I
going.
do want to go ahead and get Adam in, though. Adam's been waiting for quite a while, as well as Jeremiah and Grayson.
Okay, cool. And I just thought that was really funny. Like Mark's reaction, like, oh, what?
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be rude. I just don't.
No, I didn't think you were being rude.
I don't get why because some people thought it was magic, then it's a religion. I don't understand.
Right, I didn't get that
sorry.
either.
I'm not trying to be mean or anything like that. I just don't get the connect there.
Does he think religions have a
So
monopoly on
I'm
magic?
just if I can have 1 second, I'll try and draw this thread one more time. Okay.
Can we save it? Can we save it and Dustin and make a round because a lot of people want to talk. So maybe we can bring it back to magic bombs. But I wanted to ask Mark about the philosophy of science and stuff. This all relates to kind of what's been discussed, but it might sound a little off topic.
Go ahead, Adam.
So, and you had mentioned like Karl Popper and stuff earlier. So, and you're kind of talking about, scientific method and stuff. Yeah. So, I find it interesting that the sort of default position is to assume, like in this case, we're talking about giants, to assume that there weren't giants until there's evidence. Yeah. Rather than being open-minded to maybe there were or maybe there weren't. So, for example, I don't know of any evidence that there's purple turtles, but I personally would be pretty open to the idea that at some point in time, purple turtles existed, that we might find evidence of that. And I don't see any reason to have the position that I don't believe in purple turtles rather than, maybe there were purple turtles and maybe we'll find evidence. You kind of get what I'm saying? Like, why is the default position to just assume that something can't exist or didn't exist, to assume that it didn't exist until you have evidence of it, rather than to be open-minded to maybe it did exist, or to even say, I actually do believe purple turtles existed, and I think maybe one day we'll find evidence of that.
Yeah, it's because of all the evidence sort of that shows us that it didn't. So you've sort of brought out bones that haven't been verified and things like that. But if I was to go and show all of the fossils that we have of humans, across the ages and thousands of years back, sort of the overwhelming, all of them aren't giants. So the preponderance of the evidence when we keep finding human fossils, and I might add, if you go back to the Australopithecines and things like that, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So that the fossil record seems to bear out that humans were small and then got bigger over a long period of time, rather than that there were sort of large humans running around. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that the preponderance of evidence says that is an unlikely scenario. And in order to sort of challenge that sort of progression of Australopithecines to sort of like Afarenses to Sediba to sort of Homo erectus, Homo habilis, that progression, we would have to see some credible evidence that there was an offshoot of humanity. Like I said, it is possible that there was an offshoot of humanity, like the Neanderthals, for instance. That was incredibly tall, but the evidence doesn't seem to lend credibility to that statement at all. And the evidence that have been presented to me, like the sort of story about the Smithsonian destroying fossils and stuff, that I know to be patently false. So that's why I'm sort of pushing back so hard.
Right. So, but what I'm trying to ask though is, like, if we go all the way back to just the foundations of science and the philosophy of science, why is it necessarily better to disbelieve in something if there isn't evidence, if it's just as possible that it's like, using my analogy of the purple turtle, there's no real reason that I know of that there couldn't be a purple turtle. I mean, there's purple frogs and stuff. There's, you can see evidence of why it would be likely or unlikely that there would be such a thing.
Yeah.
Why is the assumption, why is the default null hypothesis that purple turtles don't exist and then until proven otherwise?
Well, to be intellectually consistent then, Adam, you'd have to believe in anything that's presented to you. You would have to believe in bunyips from Australia. You would have to believe, if I said now that there's invisible flying squirrels that zit around on, clouds, you would have to believe that as well to be intellectually consistent.
To be invisible and to fly around on clouds would contradict what we know about animals being able to do those things. I'm saying a purple turtle, there's nothing impossible about a turtle being purple.
Well, sure.
And we know of animals that are purple.
I get what you're saying, but, you'd sort of have to believe anything. You'd have to believe in...
No, you wouldn't, though, because I'm not talking about something... I'm not talking about anything that's supernatural or unusual.
Let me finish. You'd have to believe in pink emus and drop bears, for instance. There's a wealth of stories in Australia about drop bears. Do you believe in drop bears?
I don't know what that is.
They're koala-like animals that fall out of trees on unsuspecting tourists and rip them apart in ferocity.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so
but I feel like maybe you're missing my point.
Hang on, let's go back. Why don't you know what's impossible about that? Why don't you lean
without knowing any more about it? I would be open to the possibility that it's a real thing, and I think it would be more likely that it exists than not, just based on what little information.
So you believe in drop bears?
No, I'm saying I don't disbelieve or believe, but I think that just knowing that people report these things, that maybe it's more likely to exist than not.
Okay, so drop bears then.
But I don't know what that is. Like, you only told me one sentence about it.
To be fair, though, I would believe anything about Australia. I mean, don't you guys even have birds that beat the British Army like twice?
To let Adam off the hook, drop bears is a thing that Australians make up to scare tourists. They basically say, hey, there's these koalas they're like koalas, they're a bit different, they can drop out of the trees on you and rip you to pieces kind of thing. The way to prevent against that is to put Vegemite behind your ears. Actually, there was a really hilarious clip where somebody fooled a reporter into thinking this koala was a drop bear. And she was petrified kind of thing. But what my point is, without that context, Adam, you would have to believe if I suggested that to you, or at least give it some credibility, when in reality, it has no credibility whatsoever, right? This is a story that people tell.
But Mark, I feel like you're completely missing my point.
Oh, no.
Why get down to the foundations of the whole thing? Like, why is that a bad thing necessarily? Why is it a bad thing to I thought my example of purple turtles was a really good example. I think it's more rational to believe in purple turtles right now, even though we don't have any evidence of actual purple turtles.
Yeah, I don't.
Why is it more rational to not believe in them until you see evidence?
Yeah, I don't think that's rational because so I'll go to Hitchens' razor, and that is that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. You're not saying that it's impossible. You're just dismissing the claim until further evidence has been presented to you. That you're saying, hey, I see no reason to believe that these purple turtles exist. They may do, and my knowledge isn't complete, absolutely, but I don't believe it because I don't believe it because the evidence of what I've experienced of turtles doesn't support that. But if sort of somebody suggested pink emus, you would have to be up in the air about that. If someone suggested polka dot bears, you would have to sort of give credibility to that.
But there are pink birds, right? There's flamingos.
Are there pink emus?
So I don't know if there are pink emus. I've assumed that there's certain colors of things that don't exist, only to find out there's every color of the rainbow, carrots and different fruit and stuff. So it's like I don't just assume.
Bears? What about polka dot bears?
Well, if you described like a cougar or a leopard as polka dot, then yeah, something like that might. be possible.
Yeah.
If you guys don't mind,
This is
could
the
I go
problem.
ahead and let Jeremiah ask his question, and then you guys can get back into your monologue or your dialogue? Go ahead, Jeremiah. You've been waiting quite a while.
Did I have a question?
I thought
mean,
you wanted to get in on the
always have a
conversation.
comment. I don't remember posting a question.
Okay, what's your comment?
I noticed earlier we talked about the different things I brought up, and I'm sorry for bringing up several points. So I'm going to try to keep it a little bit more together this time. You mentioned I didn't have any proof from mine, but have you realized the evidence they have for, let's say, Lucy? I have on my screen what the bones of Lucy are. Those are the ones they have. Everything else is fabricated. A lot of with the other ones, they have like a pig's tooth, and then they made an entire person off of it or something else, where for these fossil records, they end up building a lot out of nothing. And I'd like you to show me the articles of these different fossils that you claim to have, because all a fossil claims is that there was once a creature like this. It doesn't prove that it had babies. It doesn't prove that it morphed into something else. Lucy, by peer-reviewed papers, has been proven to be nothing more than a monkey.
No, if you hit peer-reviewed paper, it hasn't, Jeremiah. That's just blatantly false. I'm really sorry, mate. That's just a blatant
what is peer-reviewed?
lie. Peer review, it's where it goes through academia and is submitted to people that are basically have a lot of knowledge in the field, and they essentially they will subject the paper or article to scrutiny and try to replicate, where possible, the methodologies that they use to come up with their answer. So they will go through and try to do exactly the same thing. Now, you'll say that, but Lucy isn't the most complete Australopithecine that we have. In fact, we found Littlefoot, and I'll show you a fossil of Littlefoot so you can sort of see the comparison. Because Lucy...
I think they're actually called a Bronchiosaurus.
Well, Lucy isn't the most complete Australopithecine afarenses that we have. It is in fact the Littlefoot.
My point is,
the
it
most
was reviewed by peers.
Excuse me, Jeremiah. Yeah, so this is a much more complete skeleton, and you can see that it does have the upright bones of the hips kind of thing. You can see the ball and socket hip that makes it an upright walker. So your idea that this species is just a monkey is absolutely false. And I must say that a lot of the creationist origins would disagree with you that Lucy is a monkey. A lot of them say, hey, it's a different branch of humanity. The whole point is, and the point that I'm trying to make is, afarenses is sort of so similar to both humans and apes that it kind of, we can't really place it in one or the other. Now, that confusion, it's not a problem in the evolution model of species. It's not a problem at all, because there is that everything is connected. So we would expect that kind of sort of grey area where you can't place it in one or the other. It's only a problem for the creationist model where they're supposed to be totally separate.
I mean, okay, hold on a second here. Has there even been DNA testing to show that all these bones belong together?
They don't have DNA. They're too old for DNA.
So, okay, then here's the question.
So you got a hole there already.
How do you prove any of these bones actually go together? I mean, how do you prove that?
He's got a point.
Prove that they go together.
Yeah, like that one being right there. How is that a complete set of skeletal structure if you can't genetically verify that every bone goes together?
You fit them together like pieces of a puzzle. You do realize there are people specialized in putting bones together. Like when they find mass graves in sort of areas, they can actually go through and separate the bones kind of thing. Yeah.
Where were all of those bones found? Were they all found together in the same spot?
They were all together in the same spot, yeah.
Okay, where was that spot at, please?
For Littlefoot.
This is peer reviewed. Yeah, it's peer reviewed. It should be published.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the whole thing is Lucy was just the first one found. They were discovered in a cave in South Africa in the 1990s. I'll try and find the paper for it.
And while you're finding that, Mark, can I steelman them just a bit? I will give them some. There was a lot of conjecture for the original skeleton when it was found. A lot of the conjecture was correct. Some of it wasn't. But there have just been so many more specimens found since Lucy that there's not much conjecture left.
Right.
We know quite a bit of facts about the anatomy.
Just out of curiosity, gentlemen, how many are so many?
At least 300 as of 2022.
That's it.
300 of them?
That's
300.
it.
Yeah, that's a small village.
Okay, I mean, we take what time gives us, my friends. I mean, if it gives us more, we'd have more.
I mean, if humans evolved from these creatures and there's billions of humans on the planet, you would imagine there'd be way more than just 300. Yeah.
Why?
We don't have
The same argument applies for the same argument applies for the giants. I mean,
well, no, we're not saying that every single human ancestor fossilization is a rare process. It's not something that happens all the time. So we're not saying the entire population was fossilized in some way and we found it. That's not what anybody is saying.
Right. I think I just got confused because someone made a comment. It's about the size of a small village, which that's about how many skeletons we would have. Yes.
Right. But I mean, that's the
obviously it wouldn't be an actual village.
Yeah, no, it wasn't an actual village. I'm still trying to find the actual paper for this.
I mean, my point is, I don't think that thing looks humanoid at all.
Right. It doesn't.
If you take skeletons to a layperson and look at them, you're going to be totally confused, including myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at skeletons just from research papers and stuff, and I have no idea what I'm looking at because I'm not trained in it. So I would agree with you that as a layperson looking at stuff like that, we're going to say, well, that doesn't look like anything. I would agree.
But this is the problem. Like I was once sort of debating T-Rock and sort of, well, it wasn't my debate, but I debated T-Rock, and T-Rock, he looked at a leaf, a fossilized leaf, and he said, oh, that's a maple leaf. That looks like a maple leaf. And it's like, we don't analyze and do that stuff. Like, and the weird thing was that while he said that's a maple leaf, it even had a caption underneath that said a sweet gum leaf, right? So you can't just look at something and go, well, that's obviously a fill in the blank. Now, sweet gum, it's not even in the same family, not even in the same family as maple. Like, they are two totally separate plants. That's not looking at things and saying, hey, it looks like a fill in the blank is not the way we analyze these things to find out what they are. We want to have a systematic way we can go through and tell what things are and where they fall into it. We don't just look at things. And so, you can look at your sort of bones, Stephen, and say, hey, it looks like this. But what we want to do is go to somewhere that makes a systematic evaluation of how we distinguish, say, a pig's tooth from the rest of the skeleton. And yeah, there was a baboon vertebrate caught up in Lucy. Yes, there definitely was. And it remained there for some time until somebody who's an expert said, hey, this isn't actually part of the vertebrae, and managed to remove it. And you could say, oh, but so there were bones mixed up. Yeah, but we've got so many of these fossils that you can't apply that to every single one. And when you get more fossils of the same Australopithecines, in this case Afarenses, we can sort of go, okay, they're all the same. We know there was a population of these things. So to Jeremiah's thing, we don't know they had babies, which I think is one of Kent Hovind's favorite lines. Well, once we get a certain amount of skeletons, we know there was a population. Therefore, we know that some of them had babies. We don't need to see an actual baby to know that.
My point is, you have a species. How do you know it became humans? Sure, they had babies. Obviously, these bones came from parents. So we know that there was a baby, but how do you know what that baby looked like? You have a generation, you have a species, but where does that connect to humans? There is no proof that that species once became humans. And my point is, when I called it a monkey, that species is alive and they found those bones in living creatures.
What? No, they haven't found those bones in living creatures. No. It's because we've got a series of hominids. Now we're just talking about afferences here. You have a series of Australopithecines that are different than afferences. So you've got Sediba, you've got there's a few of them. You've got a long line of these fossils that show all the signs of being ape-like. For instance, Homo erectus is a lot more ape-like than Homo habilis, for instance. And it goes from a gradient of being sort of more towards the ape to more towards the human. And so we've got this vast array of these fossils leading up to humans. I don't know how else you're supposed to evaluate that evidence.
Can I play a small video presentation, like a little bit? It's going to be a short video later after you finish a point.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm finished.
I want you to finish. I want you to finish everything. So I don't want to.
No,
distract.
you're right.
Go ahead and play it, Lupin.
Let me see, Mark. Tell me if this is your way of thinking of evolution, and let me know if you guys could hear this. Okay.
Information theory. The truth is that if
I hear it.
Through the entire
Let me lower the head like at 1.5 speed.
List of places where there's 180-degree conflict with evolution, we would be here for weeks. So I'm going to rip all of it out right this second, toss it to the side, level playing field. Let's put evolution to the test. It was in 1859 that Charles Darwin proposed the origin of species. Things evolve into other things. So see the dog, he jumped in the water and he is deciding he's going to sort of grow these fin-like things. See, so the dog ultimately turned into a whale. See how the theory works? Mind you, in 1859, when this was proposed by Darwin, it was believed at that time that a single cell was as complex as a ping pong ball. And God created great whales and every living creature that moves.
I'm sorry, Lupin, how much of it are we going to play? Because that's a lot for Mark to respond to.
So here's one of...
We could stop right there. Mark, is that like your basic theory of evolution right there?
No,
is that a fair...
no, that's completely and utterly wrong. So Darwin's origin of species...
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's sort of a straw man, a misrepresentation of what evolution says. So Darwin's origin of species. So Darwin came up with the idea, but he didn't know everything about it. He proposed a mechanism in which traits are passed along, but he had no idea what genetics was. Right, so because Darwin lived before that time, so he had no idea what genetics, how it worked, what is passed on. He just said there must be a way for parents to pass their traits onto their children in such a way that those beneficial traits are selected for, or the ones that are best able to survive and reproduce are replicated, kind of thing. That was his original thing, and he got a few things wrong. He got most of it right. But the how it worked, and I don't think he ever proposed that mammals went back to the ocean and became whales. I don't think he ever proposed that. That's a more recent discovery. Now that thing that he said wasn't a dog. Okay, he said it was a dog turning into a whale. No, it wasn't a dog. It was a ancestor of mammals that both. So that land-dwelling ones, just say that there was...
it was something like a dog, whatever, okay.
Well, it wasn't a dog. It definitely was not a dog.
Something like a dog. It was like a mammal. It was like a mammal that turned into a whale.
With science, we want to be...
Lupin, let's let Mark... let's let Mark reply.
Be precise.
It's okay. Actually, you got enough people on the panel here, and I can't deal with the mental dishonesty. So I'm just going to leave, and you guys have a fun time Okay,
Okay.
you guys enjoy.
So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, roll out,
I'm sorry,
Lucy.
Mark.
that's okay. That's all right. I get, he doesn't want to hear it. Just to specify, like, that definitely wasn't a dog. A dog is so when we're talking science, we want to be specific about things. We want to be accurate about things. We try to be as accurate as possible. So just sort of saying that sort of a precursor ancestor to a mammals isn't very accurate. That's a dog. No, it's not a dog.
It looked a whole heck of a lot like a dog, though, right?
Well, yeah, but you might
So
say
do
the same
coyotes,
about
right?
a wolf, but a wolf is not a dog. It's a
Is that
canid.
the same mammal that produced wolves?
Well,
Produced
it's a
the canine?
canid, right? So when we're looking at cladistics, we're sort of saying, hey, there was canids, and that gave rise to, I mean, it might be the same species. I suppose that's a bad example, but the ancestor of both wolves and dogs was not a dog, and it wasn't a wolf, right? It was something else. It was something before those species were actually on the planet. So when we're talking about that mammal that was the ancestor of, say, whales and dogs, it's not that ancestor wasn't a whale and it wasn't a dog. It was an ancestor of both. I would have to look up the transitionary form, but what I'm pointing out is that we do find these fossils of, sort of water
How
dwelling.
many of those mammals drowned before they developed gills?
No,
Seven.
you're thinking at it wrong. So it wasn't that, because I mean, whales don't have gills, Stephen. Whales still breathe air. So
They turned into whales specifically.
right. So
Okay.
nobody's saying that mammals became fish again, kind of thing. That's not what anybody is saying. So whales don't have gills, so none of them drown before they have gills. So that but the whole point is that even if they did become fish, right, the changes would be so incremental, so small and incremental, you could barely recognize the difference between generation to generation. It would be sort of a mammal with very, very short rear legs, as it showed, maybe an elongated tail compared
Or
to
in
its
this
parent.
case, a dog with really big lungs to hold its breath underwater.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the lungs probably grew in capacity. That's the thing. The lungs from one generation to the other probably wouldn't be that different. It's like, if you have languages, for instance. Languages is excellent comparison because sort of languages evolve a lot like evolution does. That we know that Spanish and French came from Latin, right? We know this to be a fact. That's the origin of both languages. Now, there wasn't any point where a Latin person just gave birth to a Spanish speaking kid and a French speaking kid. What happened was that those two groups were apart, and some of their words slowly changed over time. Like just occasionally a word here, a word there changed. But over enough time, the changes become enough that they change into a totally different language. So if you take somebody at the end of sort of the Latin speaking period and someone all the way down the end at speaking French, their languages are completely different. But if you say generation to generation, the languages, they're not going to have that many changes. They're just going to be tiny little changes in words here and there. And over time, it builds up into a completely different thing. Does that help sort of explain what they're trying to illustrate in that thing?
It does raise another question for me, though.
Sure.
Okay, so the point behind evolution
Yeah.
is supposed to be us trying to fill niches in the environment. Is that correct? Is that fair?
Us trying to fill niches in the environment. What do you mean by us? What do you mean by that?
Well, every stage of the evolutionary process, right? You evolve because you need to fill a niche in the environment. Isn't that the consensus?
Well, no, niches are filled by organisms. That's true. Really, it's just however some animals survive, and usually a niche is a very good way to do that, like to exploit a resource that other animals aren't exploiting. That's why that sort of koalas, for instance, which are fascinating. They're the only animal to be able to eat eucalyptus leaves. They have exploited that niche. where there is a food source that no other animal can possibly deal with. Like nothing can eat eucalyptus; it's poison, but koalas can. That they've exploited a niche. Now, sort of things like apex predators, are they exploiting a niche? Not really, no. Like if you look at sharks, for instance, they have been relatively unchanged for forever, basically, like back to the days of the dinosaurs. There's some small changes, but relatively unchanged.
It's just a little confusing, though, Mark.
Yeah.
For us to go from ocean-dwelling things to land-dwelling things, but then back to the ocean-dwelling things.
Well, not really. I mean, if you look at the lungfish, for instance, that is a fish that has been found up trees. Like it breathes air. It's got a system for breathing air, and it is a fish. It's not. I think is it a mud skipper? Yeah, it's a mud skipper that has been found up trees.
I don't know, Mark. I don't know if I can trust you because of the falling koala bears.
No, hang on a second. Mud skipper. I love this thing. It is the most awkward fish ever.
I mean, I believe you wouldn't lie about that because that's an extraordinary claim. But I mean, wouldn't you agree that's an exception to the rule?
Oh,
like, there's
sure,
not many
yeah.
fish that can do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a organism exploiting a niche, but if that's successful, it isn't a great stretch to go, hey, well, did fish exploit a niche where they could utilize land kind of thing?
Is that an exploited niche, though, or is that a mutation?
Well, mutations.
Because mutation's random, right?
Well, yeah, but they allow organisms to exploit those niches. Like this particular organism, the mud skipper, it basically has its I think its gallbladder has become a lung kind of thing. Like that mutation allows it to exploit the niche. Just as a longer neck on a giraffe allows it to exploit the niche of reaching higher leaves where other animals can't reach. So it's like that mutation has caused it to be able to exploit that niche. I guess you could also say that humans do the same. We exploit technology. And it is a couple of sort of our brain casing size and our opposable thumb, for instance, allows us to exploit that technological niche.
But was there something going on in the environment at that time to cause, start with ocean-dwelling creatures to go to land, but then land-dwelling creatures to go back into the ocean?
Sure. Probably competition, but we may not know the exact pressures that they're subject to. It may be impossible to. Some of them we can sort of give a pretty sort of.
So it's speculation.
Well, yes, in some cases. Some cases we can sort of.
It's not to say inaccurate, but speculation's still the same.
Well, yeah, in a certain way, but some we can sort of more than speculate. We can say, hey, there's so many fossils found, or there's this found, or there's that found that for instance, the rise of mammals, for instance, as being the dominant sort of trait, a dominant life form on Earth as far as animals are concerned, over reptilians like the dinosaurs, we sort of can say, hey, it was a ice age, something that where it went really cold, and the dinosaurs were not prepared for that eventuality. Burrowing mammals had an ability to burrow, hibernate, curl up, retain their body heat that reptilians did not. And that is why we are sort of more successful. So a lot of them we do know in certain ways what the pressure was. And for mammals, it was probably a fluctuation in temperature towards the cold extremes that sort of allowed us to take control of the planet, if you will.
Dustin, you've been quiet for a really long time, and Grayson, you have too, so I'm going to let you gentlemen jump in for a bit.
I mean, I don't know where to go.
I've stumped you.
There's a lot out there. Well, you didn't stump me. But I mean, it's kind of like pulling a straw out and hoping that the rest of the marbles don't come falling down.
A real house of cards. He did unload a whole lot of information
Yeah.
right there to
true.
address.
Yeah, I
to be
did
fair,
unload a gigantic amount. Look, this and this field, like especially evolutionary biology, is it's such a massive in depth field. It's I think that evolution is one of the subjects that has like more papers than almost any other subject. The amount of research that has been done on this is incredible. And it's sort of I guess what I'm getting across is it's not out of a vacuum that we've just sort of pulled this and said, hey, well, Darwin was right, let's make sure he was right. That isn't what's happening. The facts is, I mean, if evolution is just the change in traits of animals over time, then it's a fact. You may disagree with the theory of evolution, which sort of explains the mechanisms in which it works, but there's no, I mean, at least we can agree that things change over time, right? At least we can agree on that.
okay, so young Earth creationists have to believe in speciation, what we would describe as microevolution. We believe beaks get thicker. We believe dogs can grow more fur.
Right.
We believe a chihuahua, we believe in variations. We believe in speciation. We don't believe that a land-dwelling mammal eventually turned into a whale.
Why not? Like, why is that impossible?
Because a dog type of animal and a whale are clearly not the same kind in any stretch of the imagination. Now, they have similar traits, but I know you guys don't respect Kent Hovind or his arguments, but he's kind of right on some of these.
Kent Hovind.
Yeah.
I'll bring in the bot. Don't make me do the bot.
I'm sorry. Grayson made a Kent Hovind bot.
Okay.
Master's argument. Master.
Yeah, so yeah, Kent Hovind, what I've noticed from Kent is that he strawmans what evolution says at every opportunity. He's been corrected multiple times on what evolution actually says. And so I find his arguments to be trite and kind of vacuous. They don't have a lot of substance. Sort of saying that a dog can't get to the size of Texas isn't really a good argument. It's just being belligerent. I don't think that kind of straw man is sort of arguing in good faith. So
could you tell me what the common ancestor is for a human and a banana?
Yeah, so it's a prokaryote.
That far back.
Oh yeah. So plants branched off first from prokaryotic cells. They were around before animals were, but animals came a bit later. So because plants branched off, the common ancestor would be like billions of years ago a prokaryotic cell. Yeah. Or is it a eukaryotic
All right.
cell? One of the two. I do apologize. It might be a eukaryotic cell. I do apologize. I think actually now that I think it probably was a eukaryotic cell.
It's still single cell, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, as far as I know, I'm not a biologist. I can't make a definitive claim on that. But we're talking about before any kind of even primitive animal existed, kind of thing. We're talking, sort of the most primitive sort of cells out there. Even if it was multicellular, it would have been very, very primitive.
I mean, isn't it kind of weird that part of our DNA morphed into a banana, and then the other part morphed into a species that's able to travel outer space?
No, not at all. I think it's
wouldn't
more
we have
weird.
Originated in the same environment?
Well, I think it's more
meaning
weird
we would need to fill the same niches.
Well, I think it's more weird that we've got sort of foreign DNA and mitochondrial DNA inside us. I think that's actually more weird. That is sort of surprising and kind of baffling, and it sort of suggests that at some point we had a symbiotic relationship with sort of a mitochondrial cell that provided its own DNA for us. That's more weirder, but that is the case, and nobody sort of argues with that. But no, I don't think it's weird at all. It's just one path was plants which had a strong cell membrane that protected themselves by being sort of photosynthesizing the sun, and were very successful, right? So because plants are everywhere, they were very successful. But down one path, you've also got, sort of things that eat the plants, and then things that eat the things that eat the plants. And then you've got humans who can sort of feed on both depending on what they are. I don't think it's unusual at all. It's just, it seems to have thrown up humans which have a couple of traits, like I was mentioning earlier, that the bigger brain and the opposable thumbs, that have thrown up a series of traits that have been so incredibly successful that we kind of dominate the planet. Although, having said that, it does raise to mind that the most successful organism on Earth is probably bacteria. Just saying.
I don't understand why would we evolve past the cockroach. I mean, the cockroach is almost indestructible. Like, it can outlive nuclear blast.
Well, we didn't. So Stephen, sort of saying evolve past the cockroach kind of suggests that we came from cockroaches, right? So insects are another divergence. Okay, so you're thinking of this as, oh, okay, we evolved. So a cockroach and a dog and a cat and everything is just as evolved as everything else, right? There's no more evolved or less evolved. We just specialize.
Do you really believe in your heart of hearts that a rabbit is as evolved as a human?
Yes.
Does a rabbit conduct charity drives or blood drives?
But that's assuming.
Well, that's not evolution. That's morality. Yeah.
That's assuming.
Is there a homeless problem in the bunny community?
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, they're having their habitation destroyed by all kinds of human activities.
That last one was maybe a bad example.
Yeah, but the point is that when you're saying evolved, you're not saying, like, because we as humans, we have this tendency to think, well, evolved means to have technology and have car drives and have, polite conversation in dens with, our pipes kind of thing. No, that's not what it means. What evolved means is suited to your evolutionary niche or your environment, right? So rabbits that shed their pelts and have a different color from winter to summer, they're very evolved for blending in to the snow in winter because they have a white coat. They're just as evolved as us, but they've gone in a different direction. And that's why I was saying sort of the unique thing about humans is they've thrown up.
But don't we evolve per our environment, Mark?
Sure.
Okay, but if single-cell organisms started in the same environment, why did they start forking off in so many different directions? They should have had to been filling the same niches.
Different pressures and the random effect of mutations. Mutations will throw
How
up.
can they have different pressures from the same location, though?
Well, they're not all in the same location. Just because something is an environment, like you can be swimming in the ocean, which is an environment. One person will encounter a shark, another person will encounter a starfish. It doesn't mean that you're under the same pressure, but you are in the same environment. Okay, so the pressures that these things experience, and there is random effect of mutations. So mutations are generated randomly. If it's beneficial, they will adapt following that mutation. Like so plants with their superior cell walls that are very, very rigid, that's helpful. It prevents things from getting to your nucleus and eating you, and it prevents all kinds of nasty things like crossing that barrier between the cell and the outside world. It's beneficial. So they sort of, the ones that have that develop, but on the other hand, maybe ones that have this other mutation developed, but they don't develop in the same way. And ones that have mutations that are terrible, they just die. They're eliminated.
All right. Dustin, were you trying to chime in?
I was, but then I lost what it was I was going to say. I was going to ask a question that was going to try and clear some of this up, but I lost it.
Do you remember which portion of what he said it was pertaining to?
It was a good question too. No, it slipped my mind. Maybe it'll come back in a minute.
Okay.
But
We'll try
I
not
had
to
a
think
good
about it.
question.
I've always found that like not thinking about it gets it to rise up a lot faster, kind of thing. Like it's weird. The more you try and bring it up, the harder it becomes. It's really strange the way the brain works like that. Usually, I ask
Grayson,
questions about context in order to bring things up with people.
Well,
context helps every conversation.
Well, you can sort of go through and
so
say, "Yeah, sorry, Dustin, go for it, mate."
so here's my problem, Mark. Okay, when you're at the stage of eukaryote, okay, there's a communication between cells, right?
Gene transfer.
But what communication can you ascribe to the mechanisms that brought about the cell? There's no communication between electrons unless you're talking about a field that's being introduced, right? That would excite the electrons and give them a vector.
Okay.
But whenever you're talking about a structure that's built from the bottom up, you're talking about a man who's standing at the very bottom with a construction plan, right? So who are you ascribing this intelligence? And at what point do the electrons start obeying that? Electrons, atoms, neutrons,
okay,
so on and so forth.
We've kind of gone way off evolution. It sounds like you're sort of going to origin of natural forces in general, I think, which is sort of
no. What I'm asking you is, what set of facts allowed for these compounds that have no consciousness to split in the direction of plants and humans?
Oh,
where was that notion? Where did that come from?
Okay, so I'll try and sort of frame the question so I know what you're talking about. So, are you talking about how did cell replication give rise to different outcomes, kind of thing, or are you talking about abiogenesis, which is a different subject, and that's the origin of these of DNA and protein chains in general?
No, I'm asking you about what led the eukaryotes to decide to split.
I didn't decide
it's
anything.
Not like, well, then what happened? Because what you're saying here is that it's a living organism.
Yeah.
It communicates, right? So this niche, that niche, okay? What was the deciding factor for these eukaryotes to decide the individual niches? I mean, they're eukaryotes.
Okay.
The basic limits of their communication.
So deciding individual niches, it doesn't sort of work like that. And I'm not sure deciding to split it be like saying, well, what made you decide to breathe, or what made you decide to blink? Natural processes generally don't have deciding factors. I don't decide to blink. Just it sort of happens. I mean, I can, and that's sort of a function of more intelligent creatures. But sort of what made you decide to grow, for instance? It's kind of a weird question.
No, you're straw manning my question now.
Well,
hold on here, okay?
Yeah, okay.
There's a niche, okay, right? The eukaryotes, they strand together and they form roots.
Yes.
Okay, and then there's another set of eukaryotes over here that band together and they form legs. Okay, what's the intelligence that allowed for that specific? I don't want to say design. Let's say unfortunate chain of events.
Well, I mean, I don't think there was intelligence behind it. It's just a natural process that you had a whole bunch of eukaryotes, some of which banded together and made plant cell walls, and that they would be immobile, some of which changed so that instead of photosynthesizing or getting food the normal way, they found that they could take in oxygen and catalyze it, making energy. So what's the exact?
So they do think. So they do think. Are you making a concession that they do think right now?
No, I'm saying that those random mutations were thrown up, right? And there was also a whole bunch of eukaryotes who didn't do anything differently, and maybe even a bunch of eukaryotes that had mutations that weren't very good at all. They were actually detrimental. Maybe they couldn't move much. Maybe they had a really weird way of taking in food that wasn't particularly efficient. They died out, right? So they're removed, leaving the ones
Okay, so
with these benefits. And if they're very successful, and you would imagine that being able to, like, multicellularity, as we've seen from the Lenski labs, where not the Lenski labs, sorry, the algae that clumped up into multicellularity, that was incredibly beneficial against predators. When you clump up into multi-cells, it's strength in numbers, basically. You're very not eaten very easily. But these aren't the creatures going, well, I'm going to decide to do this. What happens is a mutation arises that's very successful, and so that then gets passed around, kind of thing. That then becomes a sort of because we're talking about primitive cells which have horizontal gene transfer, they pass each other's genes. That becomes pervasive among the cells. Later on, as we become true animals, it works differently. We pass our genetic material on in a different way, but the principle's still the same. The successful mutations that allowed these creatures to survive, these organisms to survive, made it so they become more and more prevalent in the sort of population of that environment.
You're talking about thousands and thousands of chemical reactions between cells. Okay, these things are not random. Okay, the structures brought up by mutation, those changes have to be made by a physical, by something physical. I mean, if you're telling me that the human mind possesses intelligence at the level of cells, which is where we are with it, the synapses as they fire, where is that decision-making process? There has to have been a series of events, right, where even if the mutation was beneficial, the mutation, the information that is the mutation itself, where did that come from? It had to have been a conscious decision somewhere, because the organism had to decide whether or not it could or could not live with this mutation, right? Because of the environment. It has to take the mutation, put it into practice, and then selective pressures will wean it off. But something implemented the change.
I'm really baffled, because you're sort of saying that it had to decide to use that no, the mutation just comes up, and all organisms strive to sort of survive. That's what they generally do, and they will just mutations.
So then why?
If I could just finish, mutations will come up because we know that sort of gene substitution, omission, and insertion just happen. You add in onto that the viruses that are then inserted and change the genes. You've got a lot of movement there for different variations upon genomes to be coming up. Most of them, like something like 99.99% of species, are extinct. They don't make it. The ones that are successful are the ones that make it. But at no point does something decide to use this or not use this, or decide it wants to occupy something. All it is just that thing struggling to survive. If it's got something, if it's got that thing that helps it, that thing that helps it is gonna just be part of the population. That's it. No one's deciding anything.
I mean, I have a hard time believing that, Mark. You know, I mean this information, it's information. Mutation is information, and that information has to come from somewhere.
Well, it's just chemicals. I mean, the chemicals does form information, sure, but you could sort of say, hey, the pulsing of a pulsar is information. It tells you how, the mass of the star and what it's going through and things like that. It doesn't mean that's...
And the light of a spectroscope.
Sure, yeah, exactly. You could say that, hey, that's information being transferred, but it doesn't mean that it's in some way, information like we would consider information to be somebody sort of typing something or putting something. It's just a chemical process. It's just chemical organics.
I will concede that not all information has a mental process behind it.
Right.
But on the other end of the equation, Mark, you can't tell me that an organism that gets a mutation doesn't understand that it needs something, right? Like a craving. Like, for example, if I had an iron deficiency, I would crave iron. What's the explanation for that?
Welcome back, Captain Stump, and welcome, Christian Pike.
Hey, Christian.
Hey, everybody. Hey.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. It's just sort of, yeah, if something can metabolize something, sure, you could sort of say it's a craving. I'm not sure that's sort of accurate though. I don't know if say a bacteria that can feed on citric acid has a craving for citric acid. I'm not sure that's the case. I think that whatever it is just utilizes whatever's in its environment. If it does mutate for some reason a want to substitute some kind of process, I think that's beneficial, wouldn't you say?
I would imagine, but that's beyond the point. Where I was going with this is that if you're going to say that eukaryotes were the first sign of life,
I didn't say that.
But that's right. Okay, so for argument's sake, just say that you did. Okay. So say you were to say that eukaryotes. What?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's kind of weird the way you're saying, well, you didn't say that, but let's say that you did.
I love the name, Christian.
Okay, okay. So
why are you?
Let's assume for argument's sake that eukaryotes are the first sign of life. Let's just suppose that's the case. What's the point that you're trying to make?
My point is that you would have to distinguish the difference between the way that the eukaryote lives, right, and the way that the human lives. And I mean, you wouldn't have to say, okay, give me a second to qualify that. Okay. All right. When we're talking about what qualifies as life, right?
Yeah.
So if the difference between living and dying is, say, your intelligence point, then how can you say that a eukaryote is alive in comparison to a human, right? Where's that bar? Where does that threshold get crossed?
What, eukaryote as opposed to a human? A human's still a eukaryote. I'm really confused.
So then, okay. Then here's the thing. If I'm a eukaryote, then how do I make up my mind and make decisions that are beneficial to me?
I'll let you circle, excuse me, back around to this, but Christian has limited service, so I want to make sure he can get in on this. And Captain Stump, you came back if you have anything to input also.
Oh, I didn't come to interrupt. I was just going to come say hello to the fellows.
Have you been following along?
No, not much.
Okay. Stump, did you want to say anything?
I don't know where you guys are at. I was gone for a while, so you guys can go. I don't know where you guys are at, like I said.
All right, Dustin.
Mark and
I'm sorry.
Mark and I are Mark and I are trying to find some common ground where we have some understanding of each other. Because, I see that. Much love.
So your cells are still eukaryotic.
I actually, you guys have already found a little bit. Yeah,
My
you guys
cells
have
are
found a little bit of
eukaryotic.
common ground.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Oh, you're breaking up a bit.
Go ahead, Mark. I'm listening to you.
Yeah. So your cells are still eukaryotic, which means that you're a eukaryote. You're a organism made of eukaryotic cells. So the whole point about cladistics is we never outgrow the previous sort of things that we're put into. Like, so we developed from prokaryotes into eukaryotes. Our cells are eukaryotic. We developed sort of multicellularity. We developed, and so on and so forth, way down the chain. Then the vertebrates arrived. Then the mammals arrived, and we're still all these things. We're still a vertebrate. We're still a mammal. right? So what you're asking, like, what's the difference between a human and a eukaryote, is kind of like saying, well, what's the difference between a human and a mammal? You know, it's like we are a mammal.
Right. So if I'm a eukaryote,
Yeah.
why am I allowed to make decisions that make my life easier? Or, I mean, it doesn't, what you're saying here is that I'm a eukaryote that can make decisions, but the eukaryotes way back then couldn't. I mean,
Well,
I make that make sense to me, Mark. I'm
yeah.
trying to figure that out.
So single cell eukaryotes don't have brains. Like, they don't have a mind, like a brain to produce some sort of mind to make conscious decisions. And we're sort of getting into the very complex subject of what makes something conscious as opposed to non-conscious. Like, for instance, jellyfish, as far as we can tell, they simply react to stimuli. They don't actually have a brain. They don't make decisions as such. They just react in certain ways. With eukaryotes, I would imagine it would be the same. They just have instinct, and they have basic reactions to the environment. You and I, we've had.
But hold on.
Yeah.
Doesn't a eukaryote have to consume things? So I mean,
sure.
Doesn't it get the signal that it's hungry? So how do you ascribe the function of eating without the ability to think?
So I'm not sure it gets the signal it's hungry like we would. I don't know how you would evaluate the two. The most successful ones, I would imagine, are the ones that move around and encounter food. Because, I mean, we're not talking about something that goes, okay, well, I'm going to set up a trap here to trap prey or something like that. We're talking about they just move around and devour anything that they come into contact with that they can devour, right? That's all they kind of do. They may be patterns to their movement, but I would put it to you
if they weren't hungry, they wouldn't move, would they?
Why would you say that?
Well, they need energy to move. So if they're consuming energy to move, that would imply to me that the eukaryote has a goal.
Well, not plants. They don't. They just sit there and photosynthesize.
They had, but they have a goal, right? They're trying to make their
they're trying
food.
to survive.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but you're telling me that they're trying to do that without being able to think.
Yeah.
That, in my mind, I can't bridge that gap. That doesn't make sense to
okay,
me,
so
Mark.
the ones that didn't have an instinct, or at least because you're trying to ascribe higher level brain situations like behavior and thinking to something that doesn't do it. All it does is react to its environment under certain specific guidelines. So the ones that react in such a way that they survive.
So then,
right?
wait.
Hang on. Well, let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay,
Dustin, let me finish.
Yes, sir.
The ones that react in a certain way that will allow them to survive, that's reinforced on the population. And the reason why it's reinforced is because the ones that act in a way that they don't survive don't get to reinforce anything. They just die.
So then, how do you ascribe behavior to us if we're still eukaryotes? How do you know we're not just reacting to stimuli in the environment?
Well, can you choose to grow?
Well, you can choose to stunt your growth, but that's another issue altogether.
But can you stop your cells from growing? Can you choose to grow a mole on you or something?
I mean, under certain hypnotic suggestion, they have been able to raise blisters, but I mean, that's about as far as that goes.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at there, Dustin, is that we don't make conscious decisions to do nearly all of our bodily functions. In fact, a lot of things that we think we've got conscious control over, we generally don't. Like, if somebody throws something at your face, you might react without even thinking. That to a certain degree, we are these creatures that just act on instinct and base functions. Like, you don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to tell yourself to. You just breathe, and that happens from birth. Sort of saying, well, there's information. It's sort of asking, well, how do your cells know how to grow kind of thing. They just follow the patterns that are in the genetics and the patterns that have been reinforced by epigenetics, which is how the genetics interact with the world, right? You've heard of epigenetics? It's kind of a new field.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's basically how your genetics respond to the world. They switch themselves on and off depending on what the environment is. So the way that you sort of grow and your autonomous functions is what we're talking about, is kind of like, well, wait, what tells me I have to breathe? Well, the animals and the creatures that don't breathe, they don't last very long, right? They don't get to move on and pass their genetics to other creatures. That stops right there. If you're a creature that needs to or doesn't breathe basically automatically, you won't get to a point where you're passing on genetic material. It just won't happen.
That's well established. I understand that, Mark.
Yeah.
The issue is where, I mean, because the genetic material is information, right? It came from a pattern. That pattern had to be set. And you're telling me that it's from time, but if it's from time and there's a selective pressure, then there has to have been.
No, I don't think it's just time, Dustin. I think that, you know, we're sort of getting into abiogenesis, like what caused these protein chains and the initial conditions to be able to have autocatalytic self-replicating cells in the first place. Like we're getting into.
No, I'm not trying to break it down into a basic chemistry lesson. No, I'm asking about the information, right? Okay, I mean, we know that chemicals react with each other.
Yeah.
Right. We know that.
Yeah.
There's electrical bonds and such. We could probably mix all kinds of chemicals together and never come up with a living life form, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so then where was the original pattern? Okay, I mean, they say it's panspermia, right? But then you're not really solving the problem, you're shifting the goalpost.
Well, that's
the
one
thing that doesn't make sense. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is, even if it's at random, Mark, even if it's completely at random, the original cell that spawned off into all these other eukaryotes had to have a design. That information had to come from somewhere. The pattern didn't just originate from chemicals reacting with each other. That physical structure where the carbon links with the nitrogen, links with the oxygen, creates a basic structure that can form a eukaryote. That structure.
It looks like Dustin came ready to rumble.
Yeah, so
that structure came from somewhere.
Sure. Like, nobody's saying it didn't come from somewhere. That's definitely a given, right? Nobody's arguing that it sort of flipped into existence out of nowhere, Dustin. I'm not saying that. But we're getting
Mark,
into.
You're gonna have to slow down.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to eat these cookies and milk, and you're making me laugh.
Okay, sorry. So there's a number of hypotheses, and you mentioned one of them about where these structures originally came from. Now, while evolution is a theory, evolution doesn't cover the origin of life. This is what you've got to understand, Dustin. Just first off, evolution explains the biodiversity of life, why we see such unique forms and why they're spread over the geographical areas that they are, and all of that kind of stuff, right? But abiogenesis, that's not a theory. So there's a number of hypotheses that we've put together, one of them being panspermia. That's absolutely right. Another one is the sort of hydrothermal vents, which was very popular a while back. I lean towards amyloid world, that it was sort of these amyloid sheets that sort of had chemical interactions on them, providing receptors in which they can autocatalyze. But we're not saying, hey, that's a theory, like the theory of evolution. We're saying, hey, there's a number of hypotheses. We're not sure which one is right. A lot of Christians who do believe in evolution think that God started the whole thing off. And that's fine. Like, I can't say, hey, that goes against the theory of evolution, because evolution doesn't cover that, right? It doesn't address where it came. It could very well have been a god, created evolution, created all this information, and started the whole process rolling. Sure, I don't have a theory to sort of say, hey, that isn't what scientists believe, because abiogenesis, or the origins of life, is not a theory. It's just not. There is not a consensus on it. There's a lot of different hypotheses. You mentioned one, panspermia. Yeah, it raises the question, where did that come from? Sure, it does. But I don't lean towards that one. I think that it there's no evidence for it. Essentially, there's no evidence that it did come from off world, except maybe I think the Japanese found some uracil, which is one of the building blocks of RNA, in an asteroid recently, which was weird and strange. They hypothesized that the heating and cooling that's required for these protein chains to form was a spinning asteroid. But look, Dustin, at the end of the day, like, you're right, that's speculation. Do we know that for sure? Absolutely not. No.
I'm gonna have to do some more research and get back to you, Mark. But
yeah, sorry,
I mean,
but like, you're talking about subjects that are insanely complicated, Dustin. Like, just some of the most complex things you're ever going to look into. Evolution's incredibly complicated. It takes a while to understand it. You've got to sort of really study it, and a lot of it is anti-intuitive, right? So a lot of it is sort of, you think, hey,
I second that.
yeah, so why don't humans just kill each other if evolution is thing? Because evolution, it's sort of, you want to be the strongest and survive and propagate your lineage among all others, and it's anti-intuitive, but social creatures don't succeed like that. They succeed working in groups, which is what we see from humans. But it is anti-intuitive. Like, it seems like, and so, like, there's a lot of things that are anti-intuitive. Like, for instance, the Earth looks flat, right? It's anti-intuitive to think that it's round. It looks flat, but it is round. It's an oblate spheroid. That is true. It is not a flat plane, even though to our intuition that seems wrong.
Well, same thing goes for our God, right? It's against your intuition to say there's a God, but there is one. So,
well,
it's the same way. It's the same thing.
I don't think it's against.
You can't prove how life got here, but we say God did it.
Okay, and that's fine. I totally get that. I don't think it's not intuitive to say God. I think that it depends on the sort of claim that you're making, whether it's intuitive or not. But I guess that I'm getting across that intuition, like simply looking at something and saying, hey, my intuition says this, my gut feelings say this, is not a good way to evaluate whether something is true or not, when we seem to get a much better result when using things like rationality and logic and these methods that seem to produce a higher level of reliability. That's essentially what I'm saying. Sure.
That's the same argument Christians have, right? It's against because you said before that, I've never seen a mind without a body, or along them lines.
Brain, some sort of brain.
Right, a mind or brain. So it's the same thing. It's against your intuition to believe that there could be a God, because you don't believe that there could be a brain without a body.
That's not
so
intuition.
It's against your intuition. Well, it is against your intuition. You don't know what type of. You cannot say that you know everything. You can only say that you know what you know from your observations. You've never seen a brain without a body. You don't know if there's other type of bodies and brains. You don't know that.
Yes,
your intuition tells you there's not.
Yeah, no,
because you can't possibly know.
That's not intuition, Stump. That's inference. Like, so when you're seeing patterns of things happening, right? It's not intuition anymore. It's inference. So, for instance, if you see, just say you've got no idea how traffic lights work, and you see that every time there's a green light, cars start to flow. It's not intuition to say, hey, I shouldn't walk on the green light or walk across the road on the green. That is inference. You're going, hey, there's a pattern here that every time there's a green light, there's traffic, so I shouldn't walk. That's the difference. Like intuition is just a gut feeling, and that's not what I'm basing it upon.
Okay, well then your inference is that there's no God,
Sure.
but you couldn't possibly know that for sure.
I
mean, you're
didn't
saying
say I
there's no
knew it for
mind
sure.
or brain, rather. Right. I'm saying you couldn't know, but you don't allow for it because
Well, I that's what I
because of
believe.
this reason.
Yeah. So
You
I
don't allow
have
for it though.
I have a justification for my belief. For one, most of the gods presented to me have almost no evidence to the point of sort of, you know, more just being claims rather than actual justifications. Secondly, every mind has a brain that I've ever seen. That's an inferential statement. But when I do say I believe that there is no God, I'm not claiming that I know there is no God, and I'm certainly not claiming that I know it for sure, like you're saying. I think that's sort of mischaracterizing what I've said.
Yeah. You don't believe that there's a God. That's what I should have said.
No, I believe there
you
is
don't
no
know,
God.
but you don't believe.
Yeah, I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in Norse gods. I don't believe in the Allah. I don't believe in you know, sort of Shiva and the Hindu gods. I believe in no gods. Well, I'll clarify. I believe no gods exist.
Well, you believe in man, so that you believe in man as a God because he's the beginning and end of all. You know, humanism. That's the very definition of a carnal mind, and you believe that humans are the beginning and the end of everything.
Well, that wouldn't fit my definition of a god. And if you're sort of saying, well, humans are gods, then it kind of trivializes what a god is. I mean, I could say, hey, under that definition, that humans or a human is a god. That definition, under that definition, then yeah, I guess I believe in gods, but that's trivial, don't you think?
I'm not saying that you believe in God. I'm saying you believe that you are a God. Man is God because you have nobody over you.
Not under
nobody
my
tells
definition.
you what to do but you.
You'd have to explain what your definition of God is then, because I am not a God under my definition.
Okay, well, if you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, what's your definition of a God? Because it's obviously not fitting mine.
That there's a higher authority that has authority over you, which you have to obey, or there's consequences. And that to you is man. The way I understand it, you believe man is the highest authority. There's no authority above man. There's no God. There's no whatever man decides. He's the God. He decides.
That would mean that governments are gods. I mean, that's a higher authority that has power over you.
Governments are.
Hang on a second. Let me finish.
Let
me finish. That's a higher power that has authority over you. You obey, or there are consequences. That would fit a government as well.
Well, governments are
men. But the government has to follow the leader, who happens to be a man.
A man. So man is the ultimate authority. He's the God.
Well, usually,
I'd say a God. You say authority. Whatever. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Well, usually governments are distributed. So the leader, who's a man that you're sort of referring to, would only have certain powers in certain situations. I mean, the government's such a wide-ranging thing. So it's the legislative, the bureaucracy. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I don't.
They're all men.
I mean, that's the way it is now. It wasn't always like that. But
either way, they're all men.
To Stump's point, to Stump's point, you would have no one above another man that you would turn to. Like you wouldn't turn to God and pray to him, or you wouldn't ask him to help you out of a situation. You would turn to another man if you were like stuck at the bottom of a hill with your truck and you couldn't get it out.
If I couldn't get it out, I would turn to another human. Yes. I don't see it.
So, but more. So what we're saying is, you wouldn't sit there and pray, and then have the tow truck show up. You pull out your phone, and you call a man, and he would show up.
So does that make it a god?
No, that's not. I'm just trying to defend Stubbs' point.
Okay.
What he's saying is that there is no God, right? But the one person who can help you out of a situation you can't help yourself out of is another man. So when we talk about God, we talk about a savior, right? In the situation where your truck is at the bottom of a hill, you wouldn't sit there and pray for it, nor would you expect a miracle to come and help you. Whereas we may ascribe some miracle features to a tow truck happen to be driving down the road at the same time we got into an accident. You would look at it as coincidence and say God had no involvement.
Sure.
So in your so as and this is what I'm saying about Stump. I'm not saying this about your belief.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to preface that. But in Stump's iteration of points that he made, the ideal is that you have no higher authority than another man who could help you out of a bad situation.
Okay. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not sure why that person would have authority, or I have authority.
Yes, you have authority.
Sure.
Yeah, and then if you call a guy with a tow truck, he has authority over his tow truck.
Sure.
That would help you. Yeah. So there's no higher authority than that of a man.
There's no higher authority than that of a man. I don't know.
In the scenario where
I think that sort
in
of
the scenario,
a police officer that directs me to do something, in accordance with the law, I would have to do it, or else there would be consequence. So I would see that under
but that would be enforced.
Well, hold on a
That
sec.
would
Let
be
me
enforced
finish.
by a man.
Let me finish.
Yes, sir.
That sort of that would be an authority. So is it me that's the god, or anyone that just happens to have authority over me at the time? Who was the god in this?
Well, that's not how Stump. That's not how Stump. That's not how Stump phrased it. You're misunderstanding.
So
okay, so the way he's putting.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Stump, do you want to reiterate?
Yeah, all I'm saying is when you reject God, there's no God. You say man is a head of his own self. He's the head. He does what he wants the way he wants to do it. However that comes about through a government or groups getting together, because there's nothing else above what you decide. And you are, in my opinion, this is my opinion, and no one can tell me you have made yourself a God. That's all I'm saying. Humans have made themselves gods, the ones that don't believe. But
yeah, but
that's
I mean,
that's simple. It's a simple thing.
I mean, you can use a definition as sort of anything that has authority over you as a god, but I think that sort of trivializes what a god is. To sort of say, hey, if something has you place something has authority, then it is a god. Then you have the store manager is a god, and the guy in charge of the police is a god, and the politicians are gods, and at that point,
that is exactly correct.
We all have
authority. You're bringing it to a point of being ridiculous. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying mankind made himself the god of his own world. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the fire chief is the head. I'm not saying none of that. I'm saying this man who rejects God has made mankind the end of authority, however that comes about.
Yeah, that isn't how I define a god, and I don't think it would sort of how philosophy defines a god. So when I'm talking about a god, I'm talking about...
I'm sorry, if I may, I have been quiet for a good bit. If you don't mind, Mark, could you give us your definition of what a god is?
Yeah, just about to. Yeah, good idea, Stephen. It is probably a good idea. So what I'm talking about is a non-contingent, so a necessary agent that has direct influence over the natural processes of the world, or in some way was the origin for them. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so the Christian God would constitute a god in your book.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's a diversity of opinions, and I believe when you're a human being, you make yourself a god when you reject God. That's all. Different opinions. So just because you're, you say you're atheist doesn't mean your opinion's right. It just means you have an opinion. That's it.
But you would have authority over certain people working for you, Stump, wouldn't you, for instance? Does that make you a god?
So you're bringing it down again to this ridiculous idea. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this mankind, when they reject God, they make themselves the ultimate authority.
I'm
However
just
that
looking
comes
for
about. You're not understanding that.
I'm looking for consistency.
But you're trying to micro to ridiculous, you were the police chief, so therefore you had men under you. You're the God. No, I'm not saying that.
Well, I'm not trying
to. This. You decide.
I'm not.
You decide what's right or wrong in your own mind. I mean, mankind, not you. Maybe that's what I'm saying wrong. Me, you, and all that. No, mankind who reject God make themselves gods.
Okay. I just I do want to entertain your sort of definition. I just think it sort of becomes what is a god is kind of a triviality at that point. It's simply someone with authority.
I mean, I accept your definition of a god. My question for you would be, I understand you've never found evidence for a God or the existence of a God, but have you wholeheartedly searched
Yes.
for evidence?
Yep.
You have?
Yep. Been to.
Could you give us some story about like where you searched or what research you did?
I certainly was invited to a sort of evangelical congregation, really open mind, sung the hymns and listened and heard the sermon, and I really kept an open mind. I really did. And don't get me wrong, they were lovely people, really nice. I didn't like, they sort of said, oh, if you come to this and do this and pray with us and stuff, the spirit will touch your heart and you will, sort of have God there, and that did not happen. I did keep an open mind. I really wanted to say, hey, I'm going to participate. I'm going to sort of, really give it a shot. And it just didn't. There was nothing there I could identify as a god. But don't get me wrong, they were really nice people, and they were a lovely community of people, and very, very nice. But sort of that to me, having a nice community and being nice people isn't a god sort of touching me. That's just encountering nice people, basically. Yeah.
Do you take personal testimony as valid?
I think anecdotal evidence is really weak. Even the police know that anecdotal evidence is weak. They would much rather, sort of DNA evidence and things like that. We know that people can be mistaken about what they see. And if I was to take anecdotal evidence, there's multiple religions, because I did the same thing with Muslims and stuff. I've really tried to sort of, open myself and say, hey, find evidence for Allah, or Buddhism, find evidence for Buddha and things like that. So I would have to take their anecdotes on the same level if we're to be intellectually consistent. So I don't hold anecdotes as being particularly good. In fact, during one of my things, I encountered somebody who said, "Oh, well, just let me finish this.
What if their testimony was tied to like their death?
Well, just 1 second.
Like, what if they were willing to die for their? Okay, but come back and answer this.
Yeah, I definitely will. One guy told me this miracle that he saw where they're in the church and some guy's leg was shorter than the other and lengthened. And that's that.
Oh my gosh, that's a parlor trick,
right?
And correct, it usually happens in the charismatic circles, and I'm ashamed that happens in the Christian circles at all.
But I guess what I'm saying is, if I took that anecdote as true, right, that's something that we know to be, they trick people with it. So, that's why anecdotes aren't particularly strong, because even if I believe the person, I don't know if they're wrong or not. But like, go to your question about whether someone's willing to die or not for their beliefs, kind of thing.
Well, you said that the testimony of someone is really weak evidence, but
yeah,
I would reject that narrative. I would say if someone was willing to die for that testimony, that's pretty strong evidence. And if you could get 11 people to die for that testimony, that's super, super strong evidence.
Really? I'm pretty sure I know of more than that many people that have blown themselves up for Islam.
Well, I'd say that's strong evidence that they believe.
Oh, that's a false equivalence, because they didn't know. Because hold on a second, Steve, Mark.
Yeah,
that's a false equivalence, because that was people who were committing suicide versus being martyred for proclaiming something. That's a false equivalent.
You don't think?
Oh, excellent point, Dustin.
You don't think Islamic people have sort of been martyred?
No, but not. They didn't get martyred by blowing themselves up, right? And they're not proclaiming that I have to do this so that I get my virgins, and then you have to believe me. No, they just blow themselves up, like not like the disciples who kept proclaiming, yes, I seen Jesus, yes, I seen this, right up until they were stoned to death. They kept repeating it. Like, it's not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. It's one person willing to sacrifice themselves because they think they're going to get a reward.
And, being stoned to death was like the nice version. The mean version was they were ate by lions. or
Okay,
set on
Steve.
fire while being crucified, so
Sure.
that they were lit up like
But
torches.
I think Stephen made a really good point. It shows that they believed, but what we're talking about is, I'm not saying they didn't believe. What I'm saying is that, you know, so the person that saw the leg lengthening trick, they really believed that was a true to honest, you know, absolute miracle. I'm not saying that they didn't believe, but what people believe and what is the actual truth, that's where testimonial evidence falls down.
That's a false equivalency there too, because you can prove the trick where that dude's leg was lengthened. You can't prove that it was a trick that the temple was, or not the temple, I forget the name of the place where Jesus was laid to rest. His tomb was empty. I mean, yeah, you're that's a false equivalent.
Well, you can't prove that it happened either. That's the thing. Like, just because I don't know how a trick is performed doesn't mean it's true. And how do we get that just from testimonial evidence, including when that testimonial evidence conflicts? For instance, some said that the disciples right after went to Galilee. Some of them say that
Well,
didn't
hold on
happen.
a second. Do you think that the guards that stood watch that whole night
Who were they?
would have made up the story that nobody? I don't know.
No,
that's
neither
not the
do I.
point. The bigger point is that if you're paid to do a job and you know that you're going to die if you don't do this job, I mean, so I can see the guard lying, right? I can see that. But what I can't see is 11 people who claim to have seen the same thing getting stoned and not changing their story.
Well, did they
Well,
get...
that's just the disciples, though. You have a much broader category of people who witnessed seeing the risen Jesus walking around Jerusalem for 40 days after he was risen.
Right? And I mean, we're not talking about, I mean, okay, so a guy who goes and blows himself up because he's been surrounded by the idea he's going to get to 40 virgins in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
These people had no promise of anything except for paradise, right? And they didn't even know what that was. So what possible reason would someone go to their death proclaiming something when they could just easily have changed their story?
Because they believed in it. But that doesn't, like, you're missing the point. But just because they believed it doesn't make it automatically true. As I said, like, these people that blow themselves up, they believe in it as well, strongly.
But Mark, these
well,
are people who...
Hang on, hold on. I think I would change my mind. I think I might change my mind after a few stones. That's all I wanted to say.
Maybe not. A lot of people have died for things that they believe in. Whether that belief is true or not is an entirely another story. This is the whole thing. Like, and a lot of the disciples were reported as being killed, and some of them were martyred, as you said, but not all of them were recorded as being martyred. They were just killed. I don't know what else they were doing.
I don't know if that's accurate, Mark. I believe, if it's right, it's only John who wasn't martyred. But I believe John was even martyred in his old age. Christian, am I wrong? Or Stump?
I don't know if there's any record of the Apostle John being martyred. To the best of my knowledge, Stephen, he died peacefully at Ephesus around 104 AD as an old man. But I don't know that history is really solid on that.
Well, then it might be only John and possibly Paul. We don't have evidence that were martyred.
Almost certain Paul's head rolled in Rome.
Well, I don't see that in scriptures, though.
Well, like
I know that's tradition, but I'm saying what we can prove in scripture.
Well, like Matthew.
Oh, well, in that case, you can't really prove.
Well, that's true. I have to concede to that.
No, the martyrdoms are extra canonical.
You're right.
So and like Matthew, for instance,
that's irrelevant.
There's reports that Matthew
my...
was martyred, but there's also reports that he went to Ethiopia and was stabbed over something else. So there's sort of conflicting reports of these things. Do we actually know for sure that a lot of them were martyred? I have no doubt maybe a couple were. That's fine. Like, there's no doubt. But as Christian said, they're sort of extra canonical, and there is some doubts. Like, part of it was recorded by Josephus. Josephus had some problems with the his work being influenced by the early church. We know this is true. There are some question marks over that. But that all aside, it still doesn't make what they believed true. And you sort of said,
I concede that point.
well, you
I
also
will
say,
concede that
well, just a
point,
sec.
but
I
I still
want to,
think.
Dustin, really please, you went through a lot of points. I really want to get through them.
Yes, sir.
The
Yes, sir.
also said the points of all the other people that witnessed, and sort of, so I think you're alluding to the 300 and things like that, that we don't have their testimony. We don't have a lot of people's testimony. All we have are secondhand writings that we don't have the original copies for. We don't have the originals for some of the people who we don't know they were the actual people. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We don't know for sure that they were the authors. We know Paul was. We know every writing of Paul was from Paul. We know that Peter was almost certainly from Peter, but the other ones are they're traditionally associated with those people. We don't know for sure. So when you're talking about testimony, how reliable the testimony is entirely dependent on the reliability of the person. And not only do we not know the reliability of the person, we're not even 100% sure who is saying it. That's the problem.
So Mark, my point, you addressed an extrajudicious point. That wasn't my point.
Okay.
My point was it's a false equivalency to say what happened to the martyr or to the apostles is the same as Islam man blowing himself up with the idea of 40 virgins in the afterlife. I mean, that's not taking a beating for what you believe in. That's a quick death into paradise.
Versions, though.
Well, I think that
whatever,
that sort of killing yourself is shows even more belief than sort of, possibly getting stoned, or maybe you don't, right? Like, you're definitely going to die. Why wouldn't that be a greater show of conviction, especially if you scream, God is great, before you do it?
Because you know that your death is going to be painless. It's over in an instant. You're going to get blown up, and the only pain you probably feel is a little bit of charring. I mean, it's instant, right? That death is instant. Being blown up is that. I mean, as instant as it can get. There's no pain involved. Whereas you're
This
getting
is a
beat
really
to death,
weird topic.
and all you have to do is change your story, right?
Well, I think it.
Okay.
I think it just shows that that man, in order to not just subject himself to possible death, but instant and complete certainty of death, would have to have incredible faith that he is going to a better place. I don't know anybody that would sort of argue that. But that doesn't mean to say he is right about that. I think that everybody
No, that's outside of my point. That's outside of my point. That has nothing to do. Right or wrong has nothing to do with this. This is about belief and your conviction with that, right? And I think my point is made. Even if we were to agree on your position, Mark, that there's more faith involved with a suicide by bombing, that's still a false equivalent. My point is made.
Well, I mean, there's certainly been other religions where people have been tortured for their beliefs, and they haven't given up those beliefs. What my point is whether, no matter how strongly you believe something, right, even if you're willing to, absolutely be mutilated and have the worst things happen to you, whether something is true is independent of how strongly you or anybody else believes it. It's independent of that, and it's independent of how many people believe it. It is either true or it's not true.
Your point is accepted.
Okay, that I guess is my point. That it doesn't matter how strongly.
Your point is accepted.
Okay.
No, I'm with you, Mark. I'm with you.
And
right?
just on
two people can have a
just on testimony, I just want to point out, and this is sort of something that's crossed my desk over the last few days from a friend of mine, Ember, that there's a guy called Sai Baba who lived in India. Have you ever heard of this guy? He
I believe you've mentioned it before.
I'm not sure. I may have. I only learnt it recently that he was like a prophet and a reincarnation of Buddha kind of thing. I think it was Buddha. And he claimed to be a god, essentially. He could do miracles. And there are hundreds of people that will attest seeing him have done miracles like curing the blind, raising people from the dead, doing all of these things. And you can go talk to them. They're alive right now. He died, and they claimed he was reincarnated in somebody else as Sai Baba. But this is why I can't sort of place a lot of trust in testimonial evidence, because there are people alive today you can talk to who claim that this Sai Baba guy is actually a god.
I talked to a guy who told me that Elvis was performing next week. I mean, your point is taken. I'm not arguing with you, Mark.
Yeah,
absolutely. You're completely right. Right. On that point, I concede. You beat me like a dead horse. Just go ahead and bury me, buddy.
I didn't mean to. It's just these are the problems that I have. And even like when police and my brother's a police officer, right? When he talks to people about eyewitness statements, it's two people. They witness exactly the same thing, and their stories are completely and utterly different. Like they're just, it's so like. He doesn't get frustrated. He understands, that people will see things and they will fill in details, especially under stressful situations. They'll fill in details. They'll take other things out that, they clearly saw. But it's kind of, sometimes it is frustrating because people just can't agree on what they see, and testimonials are just so unreliable. If you're comparing it to, somebody saying, oh, well, I saw that guy in the house, to you literally have his DNA evidence. One of those is really reliable and the other kind of isn't. It depends on how good that person is with their eyesight and how well they can, spot him out of a lineup and what the lighting was like. It doesn't matter what the lighting's like for DNA evidence. It just is, it just will catch somebody. But yeah, that's why I don't get me wrong. It's not like it's not evidence. I just don't think it's particularly strong evidence. That's all. Sorry.
So I'm sorry. I'm talking with my grandma. I'm outside of this conversation right now.
Oh, that's sweet. That's okay, Dustin. Happy birthday, grandmate Dustin, or whatever's going on.
Stump, you still there, bud?
Yeah, I'm here. What's up?
My
Have
grandma
you been
says
following along? Tell your grandma
hello.
we love her.
Yeah,
Hello,
absolutely.
Say again now?
Can I ask you a quick moral question, Mark, and then I will, or a cultural question, and then I'll let Stump get in on this?
Take off after this one, though. It is getting pretty late now. I was supposed to be doing thumbnails and all kinds of things today. I kind of.
That's okay. I understand.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm trying to make something work, like do a series. I might want to talk to you about this too, sort of on end of the world stuff, and it's just not working. I feel like whenever I'm trying to work off a script, I hate it. I feel like I'm being so fake and artificial. I just hate every second of it. So I'm trying to make that work at the moment. But yeah, it's rough, man. Like trying to do series and editing is rough. I really I much more enjoy talking to people, than doing scripted stuff kind of stuff, like I find it irritating. Sorry, I don't mean to like.
What are you doing that's scripted?
Well, it's just sort of responding to somebody's points and the things that they're saying. It signifies the end of the world. A lot of it, through my investigation, I found didn't have a lot of merit behind it, kind of thing. I don't feel like they're being altogether too critical when it comes to these signs and portents kind of thing. I don't think. I mean, maybe somebody somewhere's got some good stuff, but the ones that I've seen in these few that I've looked at, the signs are very trivial, like wars and rumors of wars. Right? You're familiar with that one. It's just sort of bull. that's not really something that's unusual. That's been happening forever.
Well, that's pretty much what Jesus is saying.
Oh, sure. But Jesus said that he would return to and make the kingdom of God before some of the people around him had tasted death. So, that's a bit of a problem.
Granted. Welcome back, Christian Pike.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to get a chance to say something before I didn't get a chance to say it.
Okay.
Our conversations are very edifying, and oh damn it, I just messed that all up. Never mind.
Well, no, I agree. They're good conversations, and it's okay that we disagree.
No, because he cussed.
Sorry.
I know, bud. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh no, I enjoy talking with you, Dustin. It's perfectly fine. It's cool.
Do you do open panels, Mark?
Upon occasion, yeah.
You should hold one of your rumbles and invite a couple of your more polite atheist friends and invite a couple of us, and maybe we can hash it out as a group.
So the rumble is it's specifically me going in by myself. Like, people have asked me, hey, let me know where it is and I'll be in there, and it makes me uncomfortable to do that. The purpose of me coming in here is not to cause trouble, and it's not to bring a whole bunch of atheists to disrupt whatever you're doing. If you're doing something on eschatology or a soteriology or something, I'm probably not going to be in there, because I don't want to divert, and I don't want to sort of whatever you're doing, unless it's related to what I can input on, I probably won't. Like, I'm not here to disrupt things, and I'm not here to bring a whole bunch of atheists. So I think it goes against the spirit of what I set it up to be in the first place, which is sort of me going into these rooms with honest questions and my honest opinions, and just putting them up against other people's. I think it'd be in poor spirit, Steve. I mean, it's a good idea, and I probably should have.
Well, I understand that the whole point of your rumble is it's like you against the whole system, right?
Yeah.
I respect that. Would you consider having several of us come challenge you over on your channel?
Oh yeah, sure. That
by yourself.
Problem. Yeah, sure. That would be no.
We'll set that up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Reverse rumble, maybe. I don't know what I would call it. I don't know.
We have to bring Dustin, though. That's the thing.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no. Every look. I generally, the way that I run rooms is I really want sort of people to be respectful, and like you do here, Stephen. Like, people not talking over one another, and just a good exchange of ideas where everyone has a chance to say what they think. So as long as people are just being respectful and sort of letting others talk and things like that. There are a few theists banned from my rooms. Jill is one of them. He can't seem to let people talk. I think
I've never heard of him.
Jesus is Lord. He's a very he can't seem to let people say their piece, kind of thing. It's a bit of a problem. And
have you ever debated with Brett Keane?
Not debated. I've met Brett Keane. I know Brett Keane. I've never debated with him. I'd be happy to. I'm not sure if he really wants to. I haven't seen any.
I think that would be a very fun debate.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, ask him. I don't really have contact with him as such, but I've been into a couple of his sort of rooms and spoken with Brett. I don't have anything against Brett. Brett's fine. I don't have a problem. Yeah.
Awesome. So Stump and Dustin and Christian, would you fellas be willing to back me up and go challenge Mark over on his channel?
Bro, I was already there before the channel was even designated, so yeah, let's do this.
Well, there's a problem when you have one against many, because we have many different opinions about scriptures, and then you have one person who gets to answer everything, and where you might not be able to finish your thought even before someone else jumps in. So that's a little difficult. So, I mean, I would join in, but just it's the disadvantage the more, as you probably know.
I think if we kept it to like us four, that would be a good balance.
don't know. I'd probably disagree, Stump. I think the people with the more numbers has the advantage. I think that going into a room with sort of 6 people that disagree with you is very hard. It's incredibly hard. I don't.
Actually, I think it's easier. Actually.
And you do it with grace, man. You do it with grace.
Yeah, but I mean, my background is lends itself to me being able to cope with those situations. So.
This is the first time I've ever seen an Australian blush. You turned red
I'm
when
sorry.
he gave you that compliment.
Yeah, no, I look. It's like I explain to people that I've been very heavily trained in complaint resolution and sort of this kind of stuff. Talking with people and seeing their point of view and understanding where they're coming from, putting forth sort of the objections that I have in a way that isn't saying, hey, you suck and like you don't matter and stuff. I think everybody's opinion matters. But at the end of the day, that's what I did for a large portion of my life. Was I used to do high level complaints for at one point or another the 2 biggest internet companies in Australia. So one part of my job I remember was sort of they had a complaint system and they gave our team the complaints that could not be resolved by anybody else. They'd been going on for so long. And out of the blue, we would just ring these people and find resolutions. And that is rough. That is rough. When you're calling someone that you know hates your company, probably hates you just straight off the bat because, their internet has been out for a month or something. And you have to call them up and say, hey, I'm here from this company that's caused you no end of grief and finding a resolution. It's rough. It's a rough thing to do. But I think that the one thing I probably took away that's been sort of a real benefit to me is that you can try all you like to be genuine and try all you like to have integrity, right? So integrity is a big thing, right? So our integrity, it sells for so little. It you can give it away so easily, and it's so valuable because instead of trying to pretend to have integrity and sort of be genuine to people, alternatively you could just have your integrity and be genuine to people, and that's my trick.
I'm going to say that this very discussion proved my point that it's easier to be the one against the many because you got to explain your whole point. I said about 3 words and then it went to something else.
Oh yeah,
that's why it's better.
I love
that's
you,
just
Wait, hold up.
I
Stump,
overthink things.
Take the floor.
I overthink.
Take the floor, Stump.
I really do.
I love you, buddy.
The floor is yours, Stump.
Oh, I'm just saying. No, I'm just saying. That's how.
I want to hear you get in on this.
Yeah, get your point out.
And then someone else will come in and say, and it'll go to a whole different way.
No, we're letting you have your whole monologue.
No. I'm saying.
Go ahead.
The only thing I was trying to say was it's easier to be the one against the many. People think it's not, but it actually is. Because I know Ken Hovind will say that. I'll fight 10 guys, but as long as I get equal time, because they have many different opinions and it might go in different directions. You may pull away from my point I'm even trying to make, and it'll go to a different direction. Now it's totally lost what I was trying to make.
So I tell you what,
but
Stump,
yet Mark
if I
himself gets to explain himself, completely about everything that comes up. But me, I get 3 seconds. I'm many,
So
it's a disadvantage to be the many. That's what I'm saying.
So Stump, if I get another 3 atheists together, will you come into my room and take us all on?
I would do it one-on-one, but I wouldn't do it 3 because then it goes all over the place. Because we all have diversity of opinion here as Christians, right? So we were talking about the Nephilim before you came on, and I don't believe that the Nephilim are fallen angels mating with women, but yet Steve does. So now, how can we approach a subject when we have different ideas about who a giant is?
Well, we weren't talking about Nephilim. We were talking about giants.
Well, I just also want to.
Well, that's what you described as Nephilim, right?
Well, I just also want to point out that what I was saying is that you could come in solo against multiple atheists. You claim that would be easier than against one-on-one.
Oh, yes, I would. Oh, I thought said 3 and 3. Okay, yeah.
No, not 3 and 3. You solo against many atheists.
Because if you guys give me respect like to give you, they allow you to explain yourself as long as you want. You take your time. No one interrupts you.
Okay.
Regular conversation, people interrupt themselves a little bit, but for the most part, as long as it's like that, I do it in a minute.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like we got a debate.
I mean, if you gentlemen want to set up a debate, I would love to host.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm always happy to debate.
I mean, what would it be on? Would it be on giants? Well, you guys agree. Neither one of you believe in giants. What would you guys debate on?
We can debate morality.
There you go. I didn't say I don't believe in giants. I believe what is a giant? What is it? You have to define a giant. A 7 foot to me is a giant. It could be a giant. You don't have to be 12, 15, 17, 100 feet tall. It could be 7 foot
Oh,
tall.
Okay. I'm sorry. I did not mean to put words in your mouth, Stump.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There's the rub, right? If you're on your own, you can say what you want, and no one's there to counter. Even the ones on your side can't even counter your point.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. I'm just saying how it's easier to be a single debater against many, and the thought is that it's not good, but it actually is good.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm happy to, I love a lot of different topics. Evolution, giants, whether there's a god, morality, any of these topics. Look, do you have my email address, Stephen?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. So if you want to set up a debate, just talk about it. Come with the subject, run it by me. I'm more than happy to look at it. If I don't like the topic, then I'll just tell you. That's not a problem. But most topics I'm happy to debate. I'm a bit of a, I do like debating topics, so I'm more than happy to. Just some topics like sort of soteriology and things. It's just I don't feel like I've got anything to contribute, so I don't get into those kind of things. But anyway, it was really good to talk to you. I got to take off. I got to take off. I got to get ready. But
I've been going for 4.5 hours. I believe I'm gonna shut it down.
Okay.
All right. Good night, bro.
Run chicken. Yeah. Well, I'm not having chicken, but thanks, Dustin. That's all class, mate.
That was not meant for you. That was not meant for you. That was meant for me.
You know what? I did the same to Hoven one time, so I can't complain really. Hoven took off when instead of answering.
Look, I know you believe that's at you, Mark, but it really is at Christian Pike.
No, it's
He's
fine.
always running from debates and hiding behind his wife Tammy, and it's a inside joke between us.
Look, some people just don't like to debate. That's fine. Like, I don't understand this debate bro culture that's come out. Like, if you don't debate, you're a coward and you're this. No, just some people don't like that format. Look, Christian's coming on later this week to do a discussion with me. It's not like he's in any way
on the 11th, right?
12th for me. That's right. Gee, it gave me a heart attack there that I got the wrong day. No, I'm a day in front, so that's understandable. Yeah, so that's 9 p.m. Eastern time on the 11th. So it's not like Christians go, oh no, I'm scared of this. No, it's got nothing to do with that. Some people just don't like debate, and that is fair. It is combative. It is ideas in combat kind of thing, which is, I just don't understand this debate bro culture of, if you don't debate me, you're a coward kind of thing. I think it's not productive. It's not. So
can I ask you my cultural question before you leave?
Yeah. Sorry, go for it. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so whether we admit it or not, every country has that other country around the world they don't hate, but they just don't like. Yeah. For us, it's Canada and France. Who is that for you guys?
New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah. New Zealand, absolutely.
All right.
No question about it. I knew what you were talking about. I knew the country I would say before you finished. Like, I was like, that's absolutely New Zealand. Yeah, the Kiwis. Absolutely. Yeah.
Is there a reason why?
Not really. It's just a Canada-US thing kind of thing, right? Like, it's just they're close.
They just have stupid faces.
Well, they're just in close proximity, and they're slightly different culturally, and you just have that. It's that sibling rivalry kind of thing, mm-hmm. That kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I love the Kiwis, but they're definitely New Zealanders and can't be trusted. So, there you go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your answers.
And thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And giving me so much time and being sort of very, very welcoming. I really do appreciate it. But all the best to all of you. Good night if you're going to bed. And I'll definitely catch up at some point in the future.
Good day, mate.
Much love, Mark. It was good talking to you, buddy.
Yeah, you too. I want to give a big thank you to every single channel member who does so much to help me and the community have a fantastic time and keep producing more content. Thank you so much, everybody.